Okay, good afternoon, everyone, if you're based in Ireland, or good morning if you're based in the US. So welcome to Envision 2030. We are live here, broadcasting from Dublin to celebrate International Project Management Day. This conference and the magazine we've produced is an annual project we take on board in the MSc in Project Management at TU Dublin. So it's about professionals who are going back to work as students, working together to deliver something back to the project management community. So we're delighted to do so. In previous years, we've run this as a physical event, but like everybody else, we have to adapt and change to circumstances. When you get a copy of the magazine later on, as soon as the conference is over, we would ask you to take a look at the various projects, initiatives that are happening in life science and healthcare. So part of the magazine in some ways is a small gesture of thanks to those amazing professionals who've done so much in the last 2 years. In order to try and keep the event current and to understand that project management of all management sciences and disciplines moves much quicker probably than anything else, what we've done is we've gone about trying to get some insights into the current trends and practices and changes that are happening with professionals around the globe. And what we've done here is Ken and Paul have put together some insights and some data to back it up. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paul and Ken, who are going to present some of their findings from recent research conducted over the last month. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. So as to support the Envision 2030 event, we created a short survey targeting project management professionals. The questions were covering topics like OKRs, SRO, wellness, remote working, and people's preferred platform for live events. The survey itself was a quick 2-minute task to fill in, but provided some interesting insights into our industry. For example, the preferred platform to deliver live events was Microsoft Teams, while responses were less clear on people's choice in relation to hybrid working. Not surprising post-lockdown, that corporate fitness programs were clear winners to support employee wellness. The feedback regarding PMO's involvement in strategic decision-making would suggest that the transition to an SRO is already well underway. These topics will be further developed throughout the event today with a fantastic lineup of speakers. As I covered briefly, the preferred platform for attending a live event, the results showed a preference for Teams and Zoom, with Teams a narrow winner. Hand over to Ken there.
How you doing, everybody? Ken Coibert here. It's actually hard to remember our former work lives when we took for granted the ability to meet face-to-face and when we commuted to work every day. This has been replaced with online meetings and remote working. It's not surprising that Microsoft Teams and Zoom were people's preferred platforms. The argument between Apple and Android has now been replaced with Teams versus Zooms. I think it's amazing to see how well so many people adapted to these platforms that may usually have been dismissed before their essential everyday requirement during the pandemic. It's interesting how LinkedIn Live scored at only 17.5%, considering its versatility, but perhaps membership sign-up requirements are a major factor here. John, I wouldn't mind asking you a question on this topic. Given your experience managing online events, which platform, in your opinion, offers the best functionality?
Well, so that's an interesting one. So I think, so in the three you've presented there, I think certainly Microsoft Teams is very useful for project teams in that they have their files, their documents to support them. So I think from a meeting point of view, especially for internal people in the organization, Teams is certainly a good platform. I think Zoom is great when you're meeting with clients. The security tends to be a little bit less restrictive in terms of getting people to join. But I'm slightly biased, and I have to say, for collaboration or networking, I think it's hard to beat LinkedIn Live. Somewhat biased, I have to say.
Thanks, John.
Very good. The next question we were inquiring of people was what people find as a reasonable balance of online versus in-person meetings with clients, and how they'll approach that over the coming year. The results of our survey show that the jury is really out on how we should adopt a new hybrid working environment. Results show an even spread across all 4 options and provide no real clear winner. John, I guess in your experience or in your opinion, do you see the workplace returning back to its original status, or do you see a shift to a more online working or a hybrid model?
Well, to be honest with you, I think from talking to executives all around the globe in the last month, there is a major shortage of talent. We've seen this this great resignation over the last 2 years as people have moved. So I actually think that people are going to be empowered to choose. They're going to be able to choose projects. They're going to be able to empower to choose the employers. And if it is somebody who wants that 80-20 balance, or perhaps even 100% remote, I think that the employee is going to get to dictate and going to choose that. I have to say, I do believe 90% of project management can be done remotely, but I think there is that 10% of people looking people in the eye that still needs to happen face to face. And I certainly look forward getting back to actually physically meeting students, professionals, and attending conferences all around the world in project management.
Thanks, John. Just looking at the results and the spread, I wonder if this represents our new comfort and new flexibility between online and in-person working. With the question itself geared towards meeting with your clients, perhaps it will be the client's preference that dictates the real outcome under such situations. This can be influenced by lifestyle, the accommodation setting, IT equipment, and the purpose and context of the meeting requirements itself. It is important that we take a holistic approach to realize the full potential of a hybrid model of working. And I reckon a one-size-fits-all approach may not provide the necessary flexibility we all desire. Moving to our next question that we had in the survey, we asked the participants, which of the following wellness initiatives would encourage you to work for an organization? The options were relaxing meditation breaks, corporate fitness programs, regular wellness webinars, or none of the above. And I think this is poignant, obviously, basically what you mentioned there about the great resignation, John. So lockdown and working from home have created marathon runners, budding artists, and in some cases above average chefs. And on the other hand, fitness levels for some have somewhat declined, and tracksuit bottoms have replaced the business attire. And I have to say, I admit I'm guilty of that myself. We asked the question of what wellness initiatives would encourage you to work for an organization. The top choice was fitness programs, which can provide a positive outlet and may result in increased productivity and improved immunity. The corporate fitness program option, I think, is considered an action-based response. And to be honest with you, I'm delighted to see the project management professionals who participated in the survey focusing on action. Yeah. Paul.
Yeah. And from the employee's point of view as well, that they should also see huge benefits from rolling out such initiatives. Provides a positive environment, could improve immunity levels, reducing levels of absenteeism. So while the industry continues to open up, and with the potential large movement of employees between jobs, industries, and even locations, incentives associated with wellness and work-life balance, they may influence these decisions and be a key decision driver for people as they decide to move or to change industries.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next question we asked in the survey, we asked the participants, are you familiar with the goal-setting framework, objective and key results, known as OKR? In this question, we simply wanted to gain an understanding of how widely known OKRs are. The results show that it's approximately a 50-50 split. While they were widely used in Silicon Valley, having been used in Google since the early 90s, they are somewhat of an emerging discipline in the wider project management industry.
The good news that after today's talk on OKRs by Roy and the strong panel discussion that will follow, this knowledge and awareness will be, no doubt, will be greatly increased. John Doerr, who brought the OKR concept and framework approach to Google, described OKRs as a Swiss Army knife, suited to any environment in a project management context. And as mentioned already, we hope participants who were unfamiliar with OKRs before today come away with an understanding and a desire to learn more. The next question, we wanted to get an understanding of how many organizations have an active PMO as a standard way of working. Results of over 70% show that the approach is becoming widespread. It will be interesting to see in which industries they are more prevalent. The recognition and benefits of the role the PMO provides to organization appears to be well established based on the responses received.
And then our final question, which was linked to the previous one, we asked, if your organization has a PMO, is the PMO actively involved in the creation of the organization's strategic planning? So the purpose of this question was to challenge the significant role PMOs may play in the strategic planning of an organization. When the non-applicable answers are removed, it shows a positive response of approximately 60%. So this may show that the journey to a strategic realization office, known as an SRO, is well underway, and it may not be such a huge challenge for organizations to adopt. The realization of how project managers and the PMO can positively influence and contribute to the strategy within an organization should be seen as a really positive step. John, one final question for you on this. In your own opinion, how important are SROs for the future development of project management?
Well, this is something we've discussed in class, and it's something we've discussed with our wider network of PM professionals around the world. And I think we're going to see a new breed of PMO. We're going to see project management now being recognized as a strategic as opposed to a tactical or an operational skill. So I was quite surprised by the numbers in terms of the high percentage of understanding of OKRs. I would wonder if we asked the question about the SROs, how many. I would suspect we're probably looking at less than 5% of organizations in the world. But I think we're going to see that grow. I think in 5 years' time, we're going to see that pushing towards 50%. So I think the PMO has a place, but there's such pressure on organizations to deliver projects. In fact, we are in the biggest project ever in the world. The biggest mega project ever is currently happening, and every country is part of the project team in dealing with it. So I think the essence of project management has got to move, it's got to advance, and we're going to see strategy realization offices as becoming the norm, but it's a journey that organizations have to go on. It's essentially part of project management maturity within an organization.
Thanks a million, John.
Thanks for that, John. So I would encourage everyone to listen into the speakers we've lined up today, where these topics will be covered in much more detail and provide much greater insights. This event has been put together to mark International Project Management Day, and we'll issue a supporting magazine after the event, which will cover a wide range of project management related topics. Surveys like these are a good method to gain a snapshot into our industry, but more importantly, they stimulate the necessary conversations to move forward. So I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I hope you really enjoy today's event. Thanks very much.
Great, guys. Thanks very much. Okay, Wael, you're very welcome to the session. So we're moving from Dublin, Ireland to Canada at the moment. I suspect it's much colder where you are there at the moment.
It is. Thank you, John. I'm honored to join you here, and thank you for this opportunity. Yes, I am joining you from Canada. It's colder here, and let me start by once again saying hello, everybody. And I'm, by the way, also used to the, well, not Irish weather. I used to live in England for my first degree when I did my Bachelor of Engineering there at UCL. I'm a Palestinian Canadian, and I'm honored to speak in this event. So let me then...
I'll just stay with you till your slides come up, Wael. And by the way, I should say, I think you're selling yourself short somewhat. You've been talking about the importance of strategy and project management for 20 years, Wael. You've been one of the pioneers in that. So I've no idea what your talk is about, by the way, but doing the right things right certainly seems good. So you're on the right track. But I'll just wait till your slides pop up in presenter view, and then I'll pop back to the off stage then.
Okay, so let me ensure that we have here the slideshow.
Yeah,
are we
perfect.
good now?
Okay, looks perfect. I'll step aside. Best of luck, Wael.
All right, thank you so much, John. So today I'm going to talk about the notion of strategic alignment. I loved what I heard in the first panel discussion about the strategy realization and the new role of a PMO and OKRs. So I'm going to talk about the different levels of success in the short time that we have, about 10 minutes. And then this will help us answer the following question. How can we ensure doing the right projects right, the right things right? So this is something quick about myself. I'm available through LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out and connect. If I could be of any resource to you, I'll be more than happy to be of help. And I published this book, The Asset That Money Can't Buy, in 2013. I'm a contributing author to this bestseller, also The Keys to Our Success, launched in 2019. So how can we ensure doing the right projects right? So let's remind ourselves with what we do in strategic planning, and then I'm gonna connect the pieces of the puzzle together. So strategic planning helps us answer three simple questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to get to? And how do we go from here to there? So the path that we follow is a strategy. It takes us from where we are to where we want to be. It's the way we utilize our rare and unique organizational resources in order to achieve our strategic objectives. But why should we know about this as project managers? What is the relationship between what we do and this? So in order to answer this question, let's do the strategic planning right from the start. So when we do this, we do the definition of the vision and the mission first, and then the SWOT analysis. We look at internal factors of strength and weakness, and then we look at the external environment. We see what factors there create opportunities or threats. They could be competitors, they could be other organizations that we may see opportunities that exist in collaborating with them. So this is the simple SWOT practice. And then we say, this is where we want to be in the future. Good. So we know this already. Now, strategy is the path that takes us from where we are to where we want to be. And we have tons of models, literally in literature, that can help us develop our alternative strategies. Now, it's not our purpose now to get into this in detail and how to develop the strategies, but let's say we have 3 alternative strategies here, A, B, and C. And let's say that we have models that help us decide on strategy B as the best choice. Good. Now, the question is, why should we care about this? What is the relationship between what we do in project management and this? So let me illustrate. Let's say that this is, I'm holding a marker in my hand or a highlighter. I hope that you can see it. Now, this highlighter, where do you think it would fit on this graph? So a project would fit here on this path. So here we have 2 projects. So a project is a small segment, a small slot in a strategy path. When Tesla, for example, wants to increase its market share, they go and say, okay, we have to build a new giga plant to manufacture batteries to produce more electric cars. So that giga plant would be a small step on a strategy path. It's a project for them, right? So the means of implementing strategies is project management. That's why we need to know and understand the full picture as project managers. So any project, therefore, should be aligned with this path. Any project should bring us closer to achieving our strategic objectives. So if we do a project right, if we finish a project on time, on budget, we meet stakeholder expectations, does that mean that this is the right project done right? Is there a difference? Yes, there is a difference, because look, I can do a project. Look at project 1. Where is it taking us? Project 2, project 3, in different directions. We can finish project 1, 2, and 3 right, but where are they taking us? Are they bringing us closer towards achieving our strategic objectives? And the answer is no. They are taking us in a different direction. So first, we must ensure that the project is aligned with this path, the strategy B path, the strategic path that will bring our organization closer towards achieving the strategic objectives. Hence, the notion of strategic alignment, which means, simply put, that any project needs to be aligned with this path, needs to go forward, right? Aligned with the strategy B path. And this leads us to a number of also conclusions and implications. Number 1, the definition of success. So when we finish a project on time, on budget, and so on, that would be the first level of success, the lowest level of success, the basic level of success. Now, a higher level of success is when we do the right project right, which means it must be aligned with this path. Is there a third and even highest level of success? And the answer is yes. We have a third and highest level of success, and it is when we, as an organization, are able to do the right project right over and over again. And this is a function of organizational maturity in the implementation of methodology. And that's why when we see organizations that have a PMO or many PMOs, Some might have up to 20 or more PMOs, project management offices, or centers of excellence. So they would be more mature in the implementation of the methodology, which means that they will be more successful at continuously ensuring doing the right project right. So this is then the notion of strategic alignment, and this is a way to present 3 different levels of success. I love the notion of relating strategy realization and the PMO office. And I also like to say that I also like the notion of describing the PMO as a VMO, as a value management office instead of just a project, because here we need to look at the value that we are creating and generating through the implementation of projects, benefits realization and value that we create for the organization. So strategic alignment, therefore, ensures that everything that we do must be aligned with this path. And the definition of success would be better put if we say we are doing the right project right, not just any project right. And if you are presenting a proposal, a charter, a business case to your bosses, the more that you are able to speak the language they understand, the ROI language, the more that you are able to show that your proposed initiative will bring the organization closer towards achieving its strategic objectives, I believe the more chances that you will have of getting your proposals approved. I know that I'm limited with the time I have. I wish we can have more time to elaborate on this, but I think that this is where I stop. Once again, I'm available through LinkedIn. If I could be of any resource to you, feel free to reach out and connect with me. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me. And if there are any questions now, please let me know. So, Joan, I'm going to stop sharing my slide now. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, I think that was an excellent session. So you certainly educated us, maybe slightly confused us with the VMO, Value Management Office, but every day is a school day in project management. So we take that on board with a positive view. So I know you have lectures actually starting shortly, Wael. So we're thank you so much for joining us. We will send you on a copy of the magazine. Excited to read the final version myself. So thank you so much, and stay safe, and we will talk again for a virtual coffee soon.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Great.
Now. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. So our next session is on the much anticipated discussion of OKRs that has been mentioned. And some people may be confused. In fact, 50% of people, I think, are still confused on what OKRs are. So we have Roy Champ here, we're back to Dublin again, or perhaps Portlaoise, perhaps. I think Roy, is it?
Port Arlington.
Port Arlington, excuse me. And Roy will be talking us through a fast and furious discussion of OKRs. We will have a panel discussion after this. I think this is a really exciting area. I see this in terms of the discussions we had in the analysis. And also, I think we're going to see a massive emphasis on embracing OKRs as a tool and a process to connect strategy in organizations. So I'll just make sure your slides are up, Roy, if that's okay.
Sure.
And once your slides are ready to go, and there we go. We wouldn't expect any less from an IT project manager to have everything working technically. So over to you. Best of luck, Roy. Thank you.
Thank you. I should point out it wasn't working. It wasn't working well 5 minutes ago. So, but like any good project, right on time, just on schedule. But I'm not going to talk too much in detail about OKRs themselves. It's really a subject that's been at the front of everyone's mind for the last year and a half now, is what's the future of work going to look like? And in that context, maybe what can OKRs do to help us? So most of the surveys are coming back with quite a similar response at this point as what does the future of work look like? And there's a very low percentage of people who plan or look to return full-time to the office, of those that can work remotely. 25%, according to the State of Agile report this year, will be planning on full-time remote, and well over half of people are planning on not working full-time in the office as well as that. So what has COVID-19 been? And there's been a few descriptions. According to Gartner, the biggest experiment in the history of work. I think John has described it as the biggest project ever. It's brought a rapid shift to remote work. I think I've heard it described as moving the world of work forward by 6 years and 6 weeks. And I suppose that my favorite is it's challenged all the preconceptions. This is an author that I follow, Peter Cheese, that says, this really challenged whether you could work in different ways. It really gave us the opportunity to prove that working remotely and working disconnected was just as effective. So what have we learned so far? According to Peter Cheese, again, we've shaken up the paradigms of work, of standard hours, of working weeks, and of presenteeism. It's an unintended experiment in mass-scale remote work. PMI's Pulse of the Profession this year reports that project outcomes have improved and productivity has increased. So as an experiment, looking at the metrics, you'd have to say there's been some success in this. Backing up the result on where people want to work, 75% want flexibility and 93% want flexibility in when they work. And I think it's becoming fairly widely accepted at this stage. There's no going back to the previous work model. And so what we're looking for now is what can we get and what can help us in moving forward into that. And I think it's the choices between office-based standard hours moving to remote working and flexible hours. And really it's a discussion about the when and where of work as much as about anything else, and how to connect the people across that paradigm between fully remote and fully office-based. Big challenges in this. Managing the performance by outcomes. So not managing it by supervision, not managing it by presenteeism, not managing it by looking at where people are and what they're actually doing day to day, but what the outcome of the work is. Coordination of effort across disparate teams scattered across different parts of a country, different parts of the globe in some cases. Making sure that the beliefs about when, where, and how works, so the proximity bias is removed, so that people understand that the outcome is important, not the location and the time. How do we manage remote collaboration? How do we change and assure that the cultural values of the organizations are maintained in this new environment when people aren't together? Challenging the old ideas about where people should work and maintaining a work-life balance that has, for many people, notwithstanding the challenges of COVID, has improved. Getting rid of the proximity bias and, above all, ensuring that there's full inclusion in the workplace, that we manage that diversity that we've been challenged to do so many times. And where in this then, where do OKRs help? Well, if you read through the book by John Doerr and many of the publications on this at the moment, OKRs help very much with the alignment of strategy with initiatives. They give you a visual priority for the organization, for the team, and for the individual, and they provide alignment across teams and business units, and result in the achievement of an objective. And across a disparate workforce spread across a number of locations and working at different times and in different time zones and in different ways, this can provide the glue that holds that together, so that all the organization, all the people, everyone working in the organization are working towards a shared vision of where that organization should go on, with a common understanding of what everyone else is trying to achieve. In time and place, if you look at the requirement, OKR should be public across the organization. So notwithstanding where you're working, everyone knows what and who is working towards individual objectives in the organization. When the objectives are clear and the results measurable, collaboration between teams and across organizations is much easier, and therefore the when and where of work is less important. And so we've bridged that gap in terms of people working in the office. And then once you have that flexibility around the when and where of work, OKRs provide the bridge to support the culture. There's no doubt that culture for an organization is set through the management team right down through the organization, and notwithstanding a previous presenter, it will, as they say, eat strategy for breakfast. So with an OKR platform in place, with shared values across the organization, with a set of objectives that everyone is working to, the real key then is keeping this aligned. Transparency, according to John Doerr, seeds collaboration. And one thing OKRs give you across the organization is transparency, as everyone's goals should be available. Everyone's objectives are set top down and everyone knows what everyone is working towards. Goal setting in that then provides the clear and transparent objectives. So the leadership promote the organizational culture and provide the alignment and the objectives set by the team, create the engagement with that culture. And together across all of that, they support alignment and they support the cross-functional organization, and they remove the requirement to be in the office and to provide a solid foundation for organizational culture, for team collaboration, and for working towards common objectives. And they provide, therefore, on a project basis, on a team basis, and across organizations, OKRs, in my opinion, can provide a key platform for the new world of work that we're moving into. And so if we go back to where I started on this, that the new world of work is very much around the disparity between office-based and standard hours and remote working with flexible hours, OKRs provide the link. And OKRs will allow the new world of work to be as effective as it has been proven to be, to enable us to expand the diversity and inclusion of the workforce and to share a common culture across it. Moving forward as we try and figure out exactly what is coming next. Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Roy. Thanks so much for that. So I hope people who are new to OKRs have got a little bit of insight in terms of how this can assist us in strategy realization. So this is a great warm-up for our first panel. So I'm going to add the panel now, if that's okay, Alex. So essentially, what we have here is we have the special forces of OKRs. So these guys will not be happy unless the questions are tough. They want you to give them a hard time. So we've discussed, I've even heard some of them use the term expert to describe their skill set in OKRs. Personally, I'm always terrified when I hear somebody talk about experts. Usually you're setting yourself up for a fall, but I'm sure that's not the case with this panel. So, any quick comment from you guys on Roy's presentation? Any insight you gained from that might add to your own existing knowledge?
Well, let me jump in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
So I've been managing a global team in my current role, and then for the last 10, 12 years before that in a global environment. And it was, presenteeism can't be there when you're working with a virtual team. So working with OKRs and being goal driven and just trusting people to deliver on the outcome, deliver the things that they said we're going to do. So you agree all the inputs, you agree what the outputs, what people are actually going to deliver, and it gets a really engaged workforce. So this approach, is well proven and it really works. So as we get more people remote working, leadership styles and management styles have got to change to recognize this approach. This is a great way of working.
Okay, so that's very interesting. Now, the questions are already coming in, so it's all about engaging the audience on LinkedIn Live. So let's take a look at some of the questions, and I'm sure they will be coming fast and furious as we go. Okay, so let me take a look at our first question here, just to try and go in order. We might pop up the first question if that's okay. Maybe a full house. So yeah, okay, I'll pop up the first question. So the first question here is from Anne Dowling. So Anne asked the question, are OKRs suitable for traditional non-IT companies? So we'll put that in a little bit of context. So obviously OKRs have their home, have their birthplace in tech. So any experience, or I might even push that further and say, how would you implement OKRs in the likes of not just a traditional, but perhaps a government organization or something like that? Any thoughts on that, guys?
I can take that.
Okay.
So hi, Sinam, easy way to remember, rhymes with Vietnam. So I coach organizations beyond, IT or typically tech dependent companies. I work with companies that are in the energy space, automotive space, and what we would call traditional companies. So there's a few things to consider over there. Yes, OKRs do work in different environments. The question you have to ask yourself is, typically we say OKRs are set with, moonshot goals, which means you're aspiring beyond what is possible. But if you are in an environment of manufacturing, for instance, you can only produce an X amount and you're already close to producing that X amount and you're close to selling that X amount, then where is the question of aspirational, because there is finite amount of, supply that is going to come in. In that case, you can still adopt OKRs, but you, instead of having moonshot goals, you probably go for more roofshot goals, which is commit OKRs. However, the benefits that you're still going to get out of adopting OKRs is, as Roy just said, one of the biggest benefits is transparency. Traditional companies never had transparent goal setting. The top would have goals that people would not know about, and individuals have what are called KPIs or KRAs, and they're just making good on those. So you still benefit the transparency that comes through it. You still benefit collaboration, which is setting goals across teams and across departments, not doing it in silos. You still get the benefit of hyper focus because you're measuring them on a more agile basis. So all of that ultimately definitely does benefit in creating value in the organization, and also by creating a sense of purpose, which is typically lost in traditional companies. People don't feel as connected. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in all the companies, but in a lot of the companies, people don't feel as connected to the purpose of strategy at the highest level. So you do reap a lot of those benefits.
Okay, Stephen, I'll agree. You are an expert. Okay, I'll agree with
Sorry.
that. My goodness, I was waiting for you to breathe. I was waiting for you to breathe, but it didn't come. So you're passionate about OKRs, and that's really good. So I learned loads from that. So I might take that question and ask: has anyone got a case study without breaching any confidentiality where they've implemented OKRs in a non-traditional IT company? Give us maybe a short synopsis, or if there's any lesson learned from doing so, what would that be? Any of the other panelists care to jump in on that?
Totally, John. I'd like to jump in. Hi, I'm Ellen from Germany, and I've implemented OKRs with numerous teams in sales and marketing. So it's super interesting to implement OKRs in sales teams because everyone knows salespeople are highly goal-driven. They want their bonus to come in, and all they want to focus on is their bonus. I'm exaggerating here, guys, but this is how it can be. And what my experience is, what OKRs can do in that non-IT client-driven environment is change the focus from away from the money pot towards the customer. So that's really a great way to find a way for the different salespeople and marketing people to regularly talk about their customers' needs and their experiences with the customers. And that way they can really orientate all their actions towards what the customer needs and away from reaching their personal goals. So that would be my contribution.
So I'm going to try and keep up with the questions, which is always challenging on a LinkedIn event, but let's give it a go here. So next question here. What I think is really important in the current climate is, it's a question here, I'll just pop it up there from Annette. So Annette asked the question, how do you use OKRs to help build trust that people will deliver in what they are required to do? And I suppose we could expand that slightly, because I think it's a really important area. How do OKRs not only build trust, but connect people who are working remotely to a bigger organization? So I think those are two interesting concepts of OKRs. Would anyone on the panel care to take any of those? Yep, go for it.
I would take that, John. Roy, thank you very much. Indeed, a great presentation. So I'm Ramya from India. So I would like to take this question. Building trust, yes, it's actually a very important factor while you're implementing OKRs, right? The buy-in, the initial buy-in when you're implementing OKRs is very, very important. The key stakeholders have to take the buy-in with all the strategic stakeholders who are involved in that particular project. So once the buy-in is there, and we've also seen when you're adding CFR, that is conversations, feedbacks, and also CFR recognitions too, along with your OKRs, has really helped in terms of hybrid workforce, connecting people, engaging with communication, ongoing communication, be it 180 or a 360 or a peer-to-peer feedback. That feedback mechanism, the conversation between the team has definitely helped the team to gain the trust and the momentum when you're implementing OKRs, especially. First would be, I would say, you need to really have that strategic buy-ins to happen to start with, so that once it becomes very transparent and there is no once the stakeholders have agreed to it, the safety net has already been casted upon, right? Once the safety net is already there, the trust is built in it. Along with that, if you add more of feedback system, more of conversations to it, nothing like that, I think that can actually help it to take to the next level or for a successful implementation.
Okay. And if I can just add to that, to the original question, I think the question was about building trust. The answer is very simple, but it's very hard to do. To build trust, you have to be failure tolerant. To be failure tolerant, you have to be willing to admit your own failures as a leader. Most of the time, leaders struggle with that. And so if you get that piece right, you're going to build the trust very easily.
Okay, so I'm writing that down. I think that's a great description. Failure tolerant. So I think it really captures what we want in both from a project and a strategy point of view. So that's a great takeaway from me. So thanks for that.
And sorry, John, just to add to this as well, I think it's really important to point out that the transparency that's created by the OKRs creates the trust between the team and the leaders, but also between the team members themselves. We can see what we're working on, what's expected of us, but we can also see what's expected of everybody else. So there's, and actually, especially in the hybrid working as well, when we don't see someone at the desk beside us, having that level of insight and having that level of transparency is particularly important.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're going to change tact here, guys. So I have a great question here from Bruna. So Bruna's asking the question, what is the biggest challenge when implementing OKRs? Now, what we're going to do here is, I want you to give me one word only. And I want to hear from each person on the panelist. You can jump in at any point, but I think, give us the word and we'll figure out the rest ourselves. Who'd like to go first with that? Biggest challenge? Go for it.
Self-management.
Self-management, okay. Next.
Cultural change management across the organization.
Okay, so it's cultural change management, very good. Anybody else?
I can go next. The biggest challenge is to actually start.
Yes, okay, very good. Yes, all in the execution, not in the planning. It's in the execution. Very good, Justina. Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think it.
Sorry. Jump.
I think it's understanding you won't get it right the first time.
Now, we said one word, Roy, didn't we? Yeah. Failure tolerant is the 2 words. It's a new word. You have to failure tolerant. Absolutely. So I think that's it. Carl, you were going to jump in?
Clarity. In one word. Clarity.
Yes. And Carl, I know that was a big ask for you because we've had some chats and you have an ability to talk. So to come up with clarity, that's an achievement. So that's great, guys. Okay, and I think we've one more to go then, Rema.
I would say having right OKR champions, not having right OKR champions might actually be a great challenge in implementing.
Now you're sitting next to Roy on my screen. That's why you ended up, he's having a bad influence on you, and that's why you ended up coming up with a full sentence. Okay, so it's really good. That's what people want here, guys. They want short, snappy takeaways. And for the audience watching, there's nothing rehearsed here. We deliberately insist on a completely authentic, original panel. It's the audience questions. Nothing is prepped. You're hearing it here from the heart, from the real world of what's happening with OKRs. So we'll keep going. Thanks for that question, Bruna. So here's an interesting one. So yes, where do you start with OKRs? So Ghazala, so should all the stakeholders be involved in setting up OKRs for a strategic project?
Can I take that, or somebody else wants to go?
Go for it, Sina. You're on a roll. Yeah.
Well, typically, if you read all the literature out there on the internet, it basically says, yes, OKRs across business units and teams should be crowdsourced. In the remote world, that has been very challenging because what is possible to do in an office easily is harder when everybody's based in different places. So the short answer to this is yes. Ideally, every single stakeholder should be part of the OKR setting process. But the critics of OKR say, for instance, any balanced scorecard is better because the discipline is lacking in OKR setting. So when you do engage all the stakeholders, you have to have a process, almost like a project management. So you have to have OKRs for OKRs.
Okay, very good. Anyone else to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'll just throw in a slightly contra argument to that one. Not to disagree, but just different viewpoint. When people say all stakeholders, if you do stakeholder mapping, there can be many, many, many stakeholders. So I think it's better to be quite focused, to use my previous word around clarity, to know who are the real voices that influence that outcome, who are the real stakeholders and who are associated stakeholders. So understand who the real influencers or drivers of the strategic element and make sure they're involved. So be quite laser focused to get the right voices and consult with those, get those involved, because that to me is a key strength.
I was trying to say that, but you said it better, Carl.
No, I don't want that. I want disagreement. I want you wrong, just fighting and arguing. You're not interested in people complimenting each other. I want somebody saying that's the greatest nonsense I've ever heard. This is how you really do OKRs. This isn't softy, cuddly. We want to hear what's really happening. Strip away the nonsense and tell us what's going on in the real world in terms of OKRs. That's what we want to hear.
I think just to give a slightly other view on it, John, that I think certainly the stakeholder involvement in setting the vision, and creating the overall view of what's happening, but the objectives should be set by the people who are going to deliver on them, and the results are what's going to measure their activity. If you have a large stakeholder community involved in setting the objectives and trying to define key results, it won't be as effective as that focus that you need for the team that's going to do it. So yes, absolutely, the stakeholders have a huge role to play, but I think it's at the vision level rather than at the OKR itself.
Okay. Any other? That's very interesting. Some kind of very deep insights coming out of this. Anybody else? One final comment?
I would like to add to that. As Sainam said, it's definitely very tough when it comes to a hybrid and a remote environment to have a buy-in and have a stakeholders confirmation or to go ahead on it. Yes, but we've also seen people who started small, with a one BU or one single team, engineering team or a product team, and then they go big also. Then they prove themselves how transparent it can be, how effective it can be. And then it goes to a larger level also. We've also seen teams start small and then go for a larger buy-in later also. It's not always the top down, it's also sometimes bottom up.
Okay, thanks for that, Ramya. So this is very interesting, and I really like the questions. So please keep adding questions. And you can know from the questions that these people have years of experience of real world strategy execution, delivering projects, etc. So I really like this question. I can't just see on my screen here who made it, but hopefully that person will pop in the chat who they are. So I really like this. Are there any suggested ways of dealing positively with non-achievement of OKRs? So it's essentially OKRs are like any strategic or project initiative. Sometimes they fail. So how do we deal with that? How do we learn from failure of OKRs? Or perhaps we could also ask the question, what causes failure in OKRs? So to me, and I'm not an OKR expert, I would certainly say a lack of senior leadership support. If you don't get buy-in at the top, most strategic initiatives are going to fail. So certainly communication, engaging with those senior stakeholders is part of that. But tell us what causes them to fail and how can we learn from OKR failure, if anyone would like to take that.
Yes, I'd like to jump in. Yeah. So for what I'm going to say, I'm going to assume that a team set themselves OKRs that they have full influence over. You have to distinguish between these two, but I'm assuming the team had full influence over their OKRs and they didn't reach some or all of them. From my experience, the most important thing to be done that usually is not done for whatever reason is to have a separate review where you really look at the content, the KPIs. So what did we do? What did we not do? And then have a separate retrospective where you talk about the intercultural or interhuman reasons for why you might have not reached a goal. A very common reason that I've come across is, well, we didn't really, now we realize that we didn't really think the key result through when we defined it. That's one of the most common reasons, and I find it super important to understand what was it that made us not think that through thoroughly, that then led us to not achieve the goal. So my recommendation would be have a review, people. Don't mix it with interhuman relations, but have a separate retrospective every 3 months or whatever your OKR cycle may be long, and then deduct the learnings and use them for the next planning.
Okay. And
interested to hear what the others say.
I might jump in here as well. I think when we talk about OKRs, it's so important that we have a serious discussion at the leadership level. What is our tolerance for failure, and acknowledging the fact that if we set ourselves mediocre goals, at most we're only going to ever achieve mediocre results. The OKRs by design, they strive to stretch ourselves, to set ourselves goals that maybe at the point in time, we don't have an exact path from A to B of getting to the end. And our job is to figure it out as part of the journey. So I would say that if all your OKRs are showing up as green at the end of the year, you're probably doing something wrong. And that's the opportunity to ask yourselves as a team, whether it's a project team or a functional team, whether you're pushing yourselves hard enough and whether you should aim that a little bit higher.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So we're hearing about the, high failure in OKRs is just as sort of challenging as success. You got to get the balance. It's a tightrope we're often working in OKRs. Sorry, Sian, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think just to expand on what Ellen was saying, there's a common saying, a goal without a plan is wishful thinking. And most often people end up setting key results, but they don't set the plan behind that quickly enough. So the exercise of planning, but then the exercise of project management or setting initiatives right after each other is equally important. And to add to that, the exercise of having stand-ups or check-ins on a regular basis is also equally important. Part of the times achievement of OKRs fails is because either it's poor OKRs or because you just did not pay enough attention to it during the cycle itself. And one of the things that I do with a client that's in the banking space is every 1 month, we put out an OKR summary to everybody acknowledging things that we have failed at in this month. So it does two things. People become more aware of what's going on and also forces you to look at things that you're kind of failing at or behind on a more frequent basis than just waiting for the retrospective at the end of the quarter.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to take another question again, just to try and keep up. And some of these questions I'll merge some of the questions together as well. So we have a question here from Aoife, and I've spoken to some of you in advance of this session, and some of you had experience of implementing OKRs in startups, and some of you have worked in much larger multinationals. So it'd be very interesting to hear if there's any difference in the approach that we should use in a large organization versus a startup or a small, medium enterprise as such. Anybody care to jump in on that?
I'll take that.
Oh, go ahead.
Please go on, Carl. I've been interrupting you always.
So brief answer. If we're scoping, in the way that we would scope project work, we scope out OKRs that so they don't work in isolation. So whether you've got a team of 100 delivering a project or delivering whatever's defining the OKRs, you could have a team of 2 people that you define the OKR around the team and what they are delivering. So size in this context doesn't matter because it's defining what the objective is that you're delivering, and then you shape it around the resources, the timescale, the outcomes that you're gunning for.
Okay, Ramya, your thoughts?
It definitely works for the small team. I think the size of the team is immaterial when you're talking about OKRs, be it a 2-member. We've also worked with just founder and co-founders starting to write their OKRs. That gives you a leverage in terms of what is expected out of what we are creating. Market-specific OKRs and customer-specific OKRs helps us to be more agile and course correct us continuously. So I would rather recommend for a small team to start really much earlier, so that makes it an easy journey for them to grow along with the OKRs. But yes, I mean, in a larger organization, as Carl said, there's not the basics
Hi,
are
Rich
always
here
the same.
With
Basics are always the same.
Okay, great. I'm not sure what happened there, but we'll adapt and we'll move with it. It did get me terrified. I just thought, so unfortunately, it's not proper enough that we were hacked or anything like that. I think it's more technical error, possibly on my part. Okay, so anyone else jump in on that?
Sorry, I seem to be adding on everything instead of...
Yeah.
I think the important thing to think about when you think about team size is also your cycle duration. Typically, for teams, the cycle duration is 90 days, but that's not set in stone. So if your teams are smaller, especially if you're an early stage startup and you only have 6 or 8 people, kind of like how Google started, you have to ask yourself, how often do you want to experiment based on data-driven decisions? So if you want the cycle to be shorter, like 60 days, if you're going to be a smaller team, that's perfectly fine. And then the larger the team gets, and the longer it takes you to get to actual outcomes, you want to wait for that longer period rather than writing inputs or outputs as OKRs and basically measuring garbage.
Sinem, I would like to disagree there, or would like to bring in a new perspective.
Thank goodness.
Because I would say,
yeah.
So I totally agree. The cycle can be adapted and should be adapted, but I don't think it should be adapted according to what kind of speed I can deliver with the people I have, if I got you right there, or that I want to be delivering at. But really, it should be adapted based on the cycle that my clients work at. So whether I'm a manufacturer, a sales team, or an IT developer, whatever, I do my work for somebody else, can be external or internal clients. I think their working speed should be the guideline for the length of my OKR cycles.
Okay, so that's why I said, as long as you can measure outcomes. Because the challenge I see with small teams is when they reduce the cycle time, they start writing inputs as OKRs. I am going to do this. I am going to launch this. I am going to produce this. But if you can get to a measurable outcome because of the customer taking time, to adopt your product and for you to have user revenue numbers, etc., then yes, you wait for that duration, because like I said, you don't want to write garbage and measure garbage. You want to measure real outcomes. So I mean,
unless
again,
you're a garbage producing company.
unless you're,
Well, I suppose just an observation I'd make that if you're trying to set OKRs for very large teams, you're wandering into the realms of setting a strategy for a company, and I think they need to be close to the people who are actually going to deliver on them. So one set of OKRs for an entire organization would be a very big team and probably not very effective. So there needs to be a direct influence with the people on the team to achieve the results, to hit the objective.
So what I'm learning from you guys listening here is I'm taking away that, OKRs are scalable and should be scalable. And that's essentially the scaling them up and down, the top down, bottom up, which is what you guys talked about is, and I have to say, I think just from chatting to you guys in sort of as we put together this panel, I did get the sense that they're difficult. It's like any strategy execution. It's a change management initiative. The typical reaction to change is, everyone's in favor of it as long as it doesn't impact on me. So that is part of the challenge. I think it's a change of mindset, culture, attitude in people in it. So very interesting learning from you guys. So thanks for that. Any final comment before we move on? The questions are coming fast and furious. I'll keep going. Okay, so here's a question, Adrian. I've seen the question in the background for a long while, so apologies for getting to it. So this is probably a comment and a question, which is perfectly okay. So the crucial consideration with OKRs is where or who holds the real decision making. I notice the emphasis on real decision making, authority, and governance fault lines. Thoughts on that, guys?
Great question. I'm looking at the governance fault lines. So the decision-making authority is got to be. We talk racy charge, responsibilities, accountabilities, and everything else. But your strategy that the OKRs are going to be delivering is going to be coming top down. So if you've got a chief exec is going to set the strategy with the leadership team, and that's then going to be cascaded down to department heads. Department heads are then working with the teams. So the responsibility is going to aggregate up through those management levels. So if you've got a team middling somewhere in the business with a set of targets you're delivering, they are contributing to an overall strategy. So the responsibility for those delivering is sitting with that departmental head. The departmental head's not just going to have that one team. There's going to be elements that are around the team that are going to contribute up to that department's part of the strategy. So I don't think it's any different to any other decision-making structure where there's responsibility and accountability through the business. So that structure should be in place. OKRs are then a tool to make sure the right things are being done, harping back to the presentation we heard earlier, making sure we're doing the right things. So the governance fault lines, I'm not quite sure what the question is there, but the decision-making authority, I think, is just cascading through the hierarchy as it would with any other responsibility piece.
I'll put the statement up just so we can see it, because it's quite a mouthful in that. Okay.
I'd like to react to what you said, Carl, because I very much agree, and yet I think you missed one point. And so we have OKRs, we're in that middle team somewhere in a huge enterprise, but amongst us team members, we have to discuss our OKRs, develop new ideas, innovative ideas every week or however often we come together to discuss our OKRs. And in that meeting that we call weekly, we'll have to have the authority to make decisions on what to do to achieve our key results in the next week. And in my experience, that is an issue that comes up a lot in the first planning and the introduction of the OKRs, where people are like, well, do I have the right to decide on that? Should I go ask my boss? And I think that's what you want to change with OKRs. Keep the official hierarchy and authority line in place, but within your team, define on what kind of subjects the team members are allowed to make decisions for themselves and on what kind of issues they still have to go ask their boss. Whereas it's still going to be the boss who carries the overall responsibility upwards and downwards. If that makes
And
sense.
if I can add to that, so I think the phrase that I use for what Ellen just said with all the organizations I coach is OKRs are about we, not me. So you have to constantly sort of emphasize that. But to go back to what Carl said, and I want to debate that, one of the problems that happens is if you actually have OKRs followed down the hierarchical structure is that you're reinforcing the silos that already exist in the organization. So one of the things that I really push for is shared OKRs. So let's say we have a shared OKR across product, engineering, and design, and these three have three different heads. Now, if that doesn't work out, we're not going to find that one person who we hold accountable for. So again, it goes back to it's a team sport, not a one-person thing. All three have failed, and that goes back to, again, tolerance for failure. So we have to really, really start thinking about things very differently when we use OKRs.
Okay, that's quite a lot to take in. Any final comment on that really difficult question? Thanks for asking it, by the way, Adrian. Anyone else?
I'll add to that. I'll agree with Ellen and Sainam, because it becomes a network and cadence is also should be in such a way as said, right? I mean, all the OKRs has to be from the organization, from the departmental, and it comes to individual. So once the departmental objectives are set, it's up to the debate of the team. They can discuss and then agree and then work on the OKR. So the decision making is individual as well as towards your departmental objective. So it has to be discussed, as Ellen said, before drafting any OKRs. It has to be discussed and agreed and owned and then aligned to the company objective.
Okay, great. So we'll take the next question here, guys. So I think it's quite interesting. And I suppose it's around the whole area of silos that can be created, even though that's the last thing OKRs actually intend to do. So Fabio has asked the question here, how to ensure OKRs are aligned to the same objective and they are not overlapping or going in different directions. Now, I suppose we should put that in context and say we all get that is the direct opposite of the theory of OKRs. The whole idea is we've top down, we've bottom up. But easier said than done. So how do we go about ensuring that there is proper alignment from OKRs at the top? And if you think of certainly a large organization, there's the champions out there, the Google, the LinkedIns of this world. But how do they do it? And I suppose, or how have you assisted organizations in doing that, I suppose, is the question.
Maybe if I take that, John, it's kind of similar to the discussion we had just for the last question, I think. It's asking ourselves as a team or a question, or when we review our OKRs, having that clarity of which strategic objective are we supporting by delivering this OKR. We should try and avoid kind of pet projects or OKRs that are unclear why they exist in the first place at all. And if there isn't that clarity, if there isn't that linkage, then again, we're doing something wrong, or are we delivering on something that nobody else really cares about except for us. So that's one way to make sure that we're all aligned. But to actually echo what Sainam said before, it's having those shared OKRs as well. So at the same time, you don't want to end up in a situation where you have two departments working against each other and delivering on conflicting goals, because that can result in unnecessary conflict, or it can make it very difficult for everybody to deliver.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll move to the next question, if that's okay. I just want to make sure we get all questions covered in the time allocated. So question here from Seamus, how do you ensure bi-directional communication? I think that's a really big challenge for organizations, especially we've no problem hearing top down. It's how do we ensure the top are hearing that bottom-up communication? So let's take a look at the full question and a comment here as well, which is perfectly fine. So how do you ensure bi-directional communication? Sometimes OKRs that are set at the top level do not transcend downwards to the team and can lead to inconsistent expectations. across teams, and probably also cause people to disengage, which is the last thing that OKRs are set up to do. So have we any real tools? Is there any sort of something you've done that actually, if you went to an organization and said, hey, we have a problem with communicating our OKRs, tell us in simple steps how we can do it. Would anybody care to take that?
I can take that. So the simple answer here is you're using the wrong tool for your OKR management if you do not have bidirectional communication, or the other answer is that you're using a tool, but your leadership thinks that it's not their job to get their hands dirty and get into the tool. So everybody else is using the tool, but the leadership is not using the OKR tool. They're still on email, Slack, WhatsApp, whatever you do. So those are the two things that can cause the break. But if you're using an effective tool that does allow communication while looking at the OKRs at the same time and looking at the projects at the same time, you can potentially go wrong.
Okay, I'm going to jump in a little bit there. So you mentioned tools. Are we talking as in processes, or are we talking as in a technology solution?
Sorry, that's OKR. When I'm saying that, I mean OKR technology solutions. It's everything that is been created for OKR management, to things like Asana, Trello, etc., that you potentially use as an organization.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to push that because I'm a big favor of the technology tools, but I always say you got to get the people side of it right. You got to have the processes in place before you have the technology tools in place. So again, I'm not trying to ambush anybody here. What are the processes? Give me a simple process. So if we talked in project management, somebody'd say develop a work breakdown structure, develop a project charter, and that's a really simple process. Somebody with zero knowledge of project management can take it on board, and 90 seconds later, they can be implementing a good practice, worldly recognized good practice in project management. Zero cost, zero technology, zero experience needed. Coffee, a whiteboard, and markers and people is all you need. What's the equivalent of that in the OKR space, anybody?
Definitely coffee.
Well,
and markers.
John, I agree with you, but we're in a situation where we're working remotely, right? So what we could have done with a marker and a board is not easily done when everybody's in different parts of the world. So even if it is something like a Zoom or a Blue Jeans, that we use for remote communication, at the end of it, we have to transcribe it in one place. And as we said, OKRs need to be transparent. So we need to be able to share, and then we need to be able to comment to each other. So there is even if your MVP tool is a Google Sheet, you do need that in order to move the needle forward.
Sure.
So maybe to add to that, Sinem. Oh, sorry, John.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please. Yeah.
I think what Sinem is saying, and what maybe you were missing, is that you totally need that tool in a large organization to get it done. But when do you do it? You should do it after the planning. So you should plan your OKR plannings accordingly, right? You start with the top, and then say you start January 1st with the top, give them 2 days, whatever. I'm making this up. Depends on the size of people, how much time you need, obviously. And then you allow a sort of, sometimes it's called drifting phase, sometimes it's called vernissage phase, whatever you want to call it, a phase where the level below it, and at best all the levels below it, get time to review in a tool, like Sina mentioned, the OKRs that the top management drafted, that they set up. You have to have a means, and you have to be committed to comment on these tools. The commitment is part of leadership, right? That's culture. You have to, if no comments are being taken in, you have a problem with your communication culture in the company. That is a different thing to address. But then, so you start with the top management, you give a certain number of days to comment on their OKRs. Then the next level defines their OKRs. You again give a certain number of days for the levels below to review, comment, and that's how you can work your way down. And obviously it should be encouraged, back to the question for the bidirectional communication, that me as like the small worker, the smallest person in the whole company, my team and I, we should be allowed to develop OKRs based on the top management OKRs and not only on the OKRs of my next superior. That's real alignment within the company.
Okay, so
we do drifting phases.
Yeah. Sorry, jump in there, guys.
6:30 a.m. in the morning with no coffee.
I think it has to be transparent. It has to be seen from the top down that the same level of commitment is being given to developing the OKRs, right from the management layer, right down to the smallest area in the organization, and that the cadence is maintained. That you're not the management team get an extra week, or the C-suite get an extra week. Everyone has the same cycle, the same time to create the OKRs for the next level. And that at the end of a cycle, the 90-day cycle, you're back again. It's not something you do once a year or do every so often.
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Roy. Finish your point.
No, it's very similar to what you look at in an agile project management. It's about developing that cadence.
Yeah, and certainly the language I'm listening is definitely agile. Is the you guys are from the agile camp? That's definitely the vibe I'm getting. But I have to say, you guys, there's a huge amount. Some of you have, over a decade experience of OKRs. And I'm just trying to imagine if I'm on the other side of the screen here, and the first thing I've heard of OKRs is 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago when Roy gave his presentation, and maybe there has been a fire lit in me. Maybe there's a spark after appearing, and I'm listening to you guys, but I think these are experts. These guys are experts in OKRs. I want to do something simple. So if somebody asked me in the project management space, I could refer to Prince2, I could refer to Agile, I could refer to PMBOK, and I could say these are universally recognized good practices. I could refer to tools as a WBS, a Gantt chart, a Kanban board. So, and if we took the change management space, I could talk about ADKAR, I could talk about Cotter's change management. And what I'm wondering for you guys as experts, if there was tools, processes, something somebody should go and look at, investigate to implement OKRs, what are the simple tools? I'm not interested in the strategic. I know you get that. But to the audience, they don't have that experience. They've got 30 minutes experience in OKRs, and they're saying, where's my next step? Give me a tool, give me a process, give me a model that works for OKR implementation. Go for it.
I'm not being very biased here. You can always look at our tool.
Oh, yes, of course. Of course. Yes. So Ramya, you put a link in the comments. You're dealing with Irish people here. We're all about who you know is how you get things done. So you promote your startup, no problem, in the comments. But tell us about your tool in a very simple way. 30 seconds.
So as we spoke, we define in just 2-3 steps there what you're going to do, how you're going to do. That's all. You can get it out of the tool, and you can score it continuously. That's all we do in the tool. We track continuously. Okay,
we look forward to you being the next Microsoft when the world buys it. So best of luck with that. Okay, anybody else got a tool or a process that they use? Something simple?
Yeah. I can go from being biased myself from the lean world. I would say look up Hoshin planning. It's not Hoshin sauce, so it's a slightly different pronunciation, but it's a really useful tool that helps you break down your strategy and cascade down your strategy, differentiate between the what and the how, and then while also understanding the why within the strategy itself. So that's where I would start.
Okay. Anyone else quickly?
So if you're looking for a software tool,
I was sorry.
Sorry, because you're looking at a software tool. I've looked. Jira have a suite from Atlassian. Just as a software tool. I'm not promoting it as anything, but it does give you an indication. And their website has a lot of stuff on OKRs as well.
Okay. So I think all the PPM tools are transitioning to that space, and that they're recognizing, and that's a really good thing. I think it's part of that journey of strategy execution as opposed to tactical project management. So that's certainly coming in there. Okay, anybody else?
So if you speak German and you want to look, and you don't want to start out with a software, I have a very cool Excel file that would be your next tool. Once you looked at Justina's tools, that would be probably the number one. And then if you want to break down your goals and get an understanding of how could I actually measure them and how could I track them, send me a message to LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share that Excel file with you.
We're going to go one step further, Ellen. We're going to ask you to pop it in the chat afterwards, so you don't get bombarded with messages. So
perfect. Yeah, if I can.
Collaboration.
Will do. Will do.
Yeah, you had John at Excel anyway.
Yeah.
So I have an English version of a Google Sheet.
Okay.
Nice.
Just like Ellen, I can pop the link in here, and you can start with the Google Sheet. And if you're someone who is more, Kanban or project driven, I also have a video on how to do this on Trello. I'll send the link to that. So those are the 2 free resources to get started with. And then I would say again, crowdsource the tool with your team once you've done OKRs for a couple of cycles to see what fits for purpose best for you.
Okay, and I'm going to say that Carl is being a gentleman here. He's working for Cora PPM, who are sponsoring the event, and he's resisted saying anything. But I do know that they are in the whole SRO space. They are definitely developing the OKR concept in that space as well.
Yeah,
so,
thank you, John. I was resisting the advert, but it's top there, top right of your screen there.
But,
so,
well, you're definitely entitled to an advert. But I know the nature of you guys is you position yourselves as a 20-year-old startup. You're delighted to hear these guys pushing the envelope as well.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's get back to the questions here, guys. Okay. So, watching the time here. So, Alex, feel free to interrupt if I go over time. So let's have a look here. Okay. Mary Josephine, how to implement OKRs to the organization when the bottom side does not understand clearly about it and they're more familiar with KPIs. So interesting there. And I think that was my question of saying, when consultants come in, you're the experts, the senior leadership team get a full day briefing, but the staff get a 15-minute briefing, whatever the case may be. So we might just briefly try and sort of distill the myth between KPIs and OKRs. Would anyone care to jump in on that?
So I'll jump in and the rest can shoot me. So KPI, you're just measuring. As an OKR, you're setting an objective, what you want to achieve, and how you're going to get there and what the end will look like. So it's a more holistic approach rather than just an indicator.
Yeah, one example that I like to give that is just clarifying your point, Carl, if it needs clarification even, that is like, so a KPI would be we're going to make 10,000 steps in the next 3 months. And then correct me if this is wrong. And then the key result would be, well, we're going to walk to Italy, which might be a bit more than 10,000 steps from where I am right now. So that would be actually the action. And we're going to make 10,000 steps in order to walk to Italy. So that is the action that will lead for us to achieve the KPI. If for some reason it would make sense for us to count the number of steps we make. Maybe a better example is we're going to make 100 calls per day. Is that really something that you want to measure? Or is it really we're going to convert 10 clients per day? So how many calls do we need to make to get that number going? So it's not really just the KPI that you're measuring, 100 or 10, but it's the action that gets you there. And that's what gets the team questioning their actions and coming up with new ways to actually achieve the KPI they're looking for.
Okay. I'm watching the clock here. Okay, Ramya, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
In our experience, KPIs, people are very familiar with KPIs, right? They have a specific attachment to it also. So if you see specifically the commit OKRs that we create, those become the KRs. The KPIs typically becomes the KRs of the commit OKRs we already have. So we know exactly what we are supposed to do in the entire day. As Ellen said, 100 calls, 200 calls I'm doing a day, but I have something. Why am I doing it? What am I trying to achieve by doing that? That gives you an objective perspective. And adding KPIs as converting them as key results and adding it to your commit OKRs would definitely be a good way to go about it.
Okay.
I'm going to disagree with you there, Ramya, very quickly.
Yeah.
I don't think that all KPIs should become OKRs, because then you're going to end up with a whole bunch of OKRs.
Not all.
It's only your unhealthy KPI that should become a KR, so that you're working on improving it.
Very true. Very true. What matters to the business, right? I mean, we cannot discard all the KPIs and then start a new process altogether because I'm so attached to my current KPI. So you can always, what matters to the business, convert that as a KR and then add it to your key objective, and that works mostly.
Okay.
And sorry, John, just to add to this very quickly, I think if I just look back at the question, there is a link to leadership there, and it's really important that when we talk about OKRs, that leaders present that visible leadership from the point of view of linking back to strategy or linking to that vision. Just to kind of actually agree with completely with what Ramya said there, that link between the measure itself and the why is what's often missing in the KPI. We measure something just for the sake of measuring it, and after a while the measurement itself just becomes the why. Whereas with OKRs, there always should be that very clear link. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we measuring what we're measuring? And what are we trying to achieve? What does the future look like?
Okay, great. So something I'm picking up from you guys, like the need for workshopping, which I fully understand in the remote, is much more challenging. So there's a lot of soul searching and brainstorming to be done in the OKR journey, probably just like most strategic initiatives, in fact. So the last question is a hell of a long one, so we'll try and get the short version of it if we can. So it's many questions, actually, I think. So how do you record and measure OKRs? Is it a project? Is it incorporated into a performance management development system, which is essentially probably a term we use a lot in Ireland? It's around sort of employee performance, essentially. Is it incorporated into 6 monthly or a yearly review, or is it incorporated into operational, functional, and duties? We'll maybe just take one answer to that if anyone would like to give it, just to keep it with the time. Anyone care to take part of the question even?
I could take it, but I feel like somebody else might want to take it too.
People will think you're an only child, Sinam. That's what will happen.
That's what I said.
Yeah. I can imagine you as a child being brought into a toy shop. I'll have one of everything. Yeah.
And like I said, this is me at 6:30. Meet me at 10 o'clock.
Okay. Well, listen, anyone else want to take it, or will Sinam take it?
I would start the conversation, perhaps. Probably someone can add on to it finally. A typical debate in the industry, right? Do we really have to link OKRs to the performance management system, development system in your language? So do we really have to link it? That's an ongoing conversation which is happening in the industry. It is actually a decision of an organization to be taken because the OKRs are very transparent, very strategically driven. So there are a lot of conflicts in terms of adding that up to a performance management system, but we've seen in our experience few adding that to our performance management and scoring 6 months once or a 1 year once. But ideally, it has to be you need to really take it out of performance management system to to aspire much more. Probably someone can add there.
I think OKRs should always contain the actions that are most important for your company to reach their strategic goals, right? We had that earlier. I think Carl explained that it's the management level, the executive level that says that that's the way we're going to go. That's the high strategy, and everyone else looks towards that high strategy. So in your team, whether it's in HR, whether it's in product development, whether it's in sales, doesn't matter. What are the activities from your daily business or on top of your daily business, whatever it is? What are the things that we definitely need to do in the next cycle of, say, 3 months in order to get closer to that strategy that our executives implemented?
Okay, great. I'm going to leave it on that and just say thanks very much to all the panel for joining us. Very insightful. I think not only industry, but I think higher education universities have a lot to learn about OKRs. Very often we're very much behind the curve, sometimes 10 or 20 years. On this one, I'm certainly determined in our own university, we will be part of the change as opposed to laggards in terms of following it. So I will certainly make contact with the panel at a later stage when we look at how we can sort of operationalize and sort of condense some of that learnings you guys have and put it into a format that's digestible, whether that be an online module or an online course or a book or something like that. But we'll certainly have that conversation again. So thanks very much to the panel. A little bit over time. Love to chat all day, but busy day on International Project Management Day. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so.
Hi, Rich Maltzman here with.
Okay, so I'll just pause this here, guys. So Rich is based in Boston. He's going to present remotely. So we recorded it as he has a class. He's a professor in Boston University. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Rich, who will be talking about sustainability, which is probably the next mega project that the world will be dealing with once this pandemic is over.
Hi, Rich Maltzman here with a presentation on sustainability, triple bottom line thinking for the project manager. Glad to be here at Envision 2030. Today, the focus is going to be on pointing you towards a triple bottom line viewpoint for your project. The triple bottom line, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this, but the bottom line of it is to focus on three things, not just one. To focus on profit, people, and the planet. That is economic, ecological, and social aspects of your project. Now, of course, objectives and key results are important to any project manager, to any business person, to any organization. Often we focus on these objectives without thinking about the fact that those objectives need to be tied to key values, and that they're not just economic, that they need to think about social and ecological aspects as well. And that's really the focus here. Do you know what this is? If you drive in Boston, you may have seen this before. This is part of Boston's Big Dig, and this is one of the underground tunnels. Of course, tunnels are underground, with some lighting. And the lighting had some problems. In fact, the lights were falling down onto the roadway and could have easily caused death or injury to people. But a rescue project saved that all. And 25,000 of these 110 pound light fixtures had to be replaced on an emergency and urgent basis. It cost $54 million. People were fired over this. And what was the cause? Well, the technical cause was that there was different metals used and that there's galvanic corrosion and so forth. But why? What's the root cause of that? And the root cause of that is that the holistic thinking, the holistic consideration of the long term was not present here. And it led to several problems with the Big Dig, this being one of them. So some takeaways from this and from the presentation. Number one, yes, of course, economics is critical. Of course, having a project deliver value, monetary value, is important, but it's only one of the three elements of the bottom line. And that in general, we need as project managers to expand our thinking and consider long-term thinking, a longer-term perspective, a wider perspective of what success and value really means in our projects. And yeah, that means thinking beyond the ribbon cutting ceremony and to what the project is doing 5 years, 10 years, even 100 years from now. And that's painful for us because we want to get on to the next project. Really, there's a mindset shift that's needed. It's about how we as project leaders, not even project managers anymore, I think the term leader makes more sense, how we as project leaders think now and how that could, should, must shift in the future. And speaking of shifting, how can we do this? How can we extend our shift, our thinking? How can we think further into the future and again, more broadly about the long-term impacts of our project? Well, it starts by recalling where we really fit as project managers and what we really do as project managers. I like this chart. It kind of shows that we're a key cog in the wheel. We are the driving force that connects operational, steady state operations back up to the overall mission, vision, the ideation of an organization. We're at the focal point. These wheels don't turn without us. Speaking of wheels, it's kind of like thinking of where the rubber meets the road in a project, where the idea turns into reality. Projects, programs, and portfolios are the driver for that. Now, there's a book called The Discovery of Heaven, and I'm not going to read it to you or even recommend it, although I think it is a very good and interesting book. It's kind of a science fiction, religion, mystery thriller. And it has 4 sections: the beginning of the beginning, the end of the beginning of the end, and the end of the end. And here's the thing. As project managers, we tend to stop at the end of the beginning, meaning when we finish our project, when we get to the ribbon cutting ceremony. But of course, projects go on beyond that. And really, this is about having a kind of a green light to think past that to even that day when the product of your project, let's say a bridge, is actually recycled and reused with the materials. What happens to those materials in that bridge? What happens when your software package is being used over and over again when people are using that app a year or 2 or 3 from now? One way to think of this is with a device that's in your apartment or your home. Most likely you have two large boxes sitting next to each other that do some stuff for you when it comes to clothing, and that is your washer and dryer. So thinking about the washer, if you were trying to reduce the amount of impact that that washing machine has, you could think about the impact it has in terms of manufacturing it, distributing it, disposing of it. But most of its impact comes from use. You can see the large bars in the center there indicating the amount of environmental impact caused by the washing machine when it's being used. So if you were trying to work on a new laundry detergent that was more environmentally responsible, you could work on things like the wall thickness of the plastic container and more efficient shipping of the detergent to customers by using AI to improve your shipping method. But actually, if you could just make it work in cold water instead of warm or hot water, you would be bringing those bars down. That's the kind of life cycle thinking we can adopt as project managers. I'd say all of us think that long-term thinking is important, but as project managers, we're kind of necessarily short-term thinkers. We tend to say, let's get this done, right? So we tend not to have that view. In fact, we live most of our project life looking back on our project from the end date, saying, what is it that we need to get to that celebration, to that ribbon cutting ceremony? And sure, we identify threats along the way, and we have our nice Gantt chart that shows us what's happening. We have key milestones. But what if we took that end date, which we see as a dot, and realized that's not a dot, that's actually the whole future? And what if we expanded that future and looked forward and brought some of that thinking back to our project? Wouldn't we identify some additional threats? For example, like what might happen to our light fixtures over time. So I assert that that's one way to do that. We need both views. We need that long-term view, and we do need that short-term get her done attitude. One way you can check this with your own organization is with something from our books we call the 3-Click Challenge, and it relies on your knowing about The Wizard of Oz, the film. And in that film, as you probably remember, Dorothy is told to say there's no place like home and click 3 times, click her heels 3 times. I'm talking about clicking your mouse 3 times, going to the home page of your organization, for example, Patagonia, and see how many clicks it takes you to get to the vision statements that you have about environmental and social responsibility. In the case of Patagonia, it's very easy. In 3 clicks, we have detailed OKRs related to becoming a responsible company. How does your organization fare in that test? So let's go back to the Big Dig, to Boston's Big Dig and those light fixtures. What kinds of practices might have prevented that situation? If that project team had considered the long term of the project's product, had thought about its project, not in terms of just scope, cost, and time, but in terms of benefits and long-term value, if it had thought about the concept of overall project risk, as PMI teaches us to do, and to not just think about individual risks, but our overall delivery of benefits and value to our customers, in this case, drivers, it would have helped. And if we were to bring benefits realization thinking and triple bottom line thinking into project decisions, it would have, I think, prevented that from happening. So I'm suggesting that as project managers, you point the way to help you and your team extend your thinking past your project's end date. Last bit here, we're bigger than our projects. Peter Drucker talked about efficiency and effectiveness, doing things right and doing the right things. Right on, spot on. But a sustainable view actually adds a third E: efficiency, effectiveness, and endurance. If you think about project success, meaning the delivery of value and benefits, that's bigger, much bigger than project management success, being on time, meeting scope, and staying under budget. Those things are important, but real project success can't be measured at the ribbon cutting ceremony, and our considerations of risk and project management should take these other things into account. That's project success. Simple 2x2 matrix from our book that shows project management success versus project success. And if you take a look at Boston's Big Dig, it unfortunately was kind of low in both. It was over budget and late, didn't meet everything it was supposed to do on time, and it happened to be fairly low in project success. There's been lots of patches and fixes required since. But if you look at the Sydney Opera House, there's a project that was very low in its project management success. It was way over budget and late, and didn't really look like its original design. But over time, it's considered a symbol of Australia. So it actually had high project success. Some projects have products that fail, but maybe the project was on time and on budget and met its intended scope. Like, for example, the new Coke, or Sony Betamax, you can look at these examples. Your projects, I'm hoping after watching this video and getting a little bit of inspiration from it, would be absolute project successes. They will be on time. They will meet requirements, and they will be under budget, and they will deliver benefits, value for customers, and have minimum impact on the environment and the social systems for the long term. That's absolute project success. And that third E, with efficiency being the x-axis, effectiveness being the y-axis, and the new z-axis that we add is this idea of endurance. That's triple bottom line success. That's really it for me. This is a very brief version of usually a 1 hour, 1.5 hour presentation. Here you see my contact information. I'm glad to engage with you. We've written a couple of books on this. There's a company established, a one-person company established to focus on this and consult on it called EarthPM. And I'm glad to have shared some time with you, even though I couldn't make it to be with you in person. At least you have this video, and feel free to comment and get back to me in person in real time using this contact information. Thank you very much. Enjoy your conference, and it was great to be with you. Take care.
Presentation from Rich there, all the way from Boston. So that was pre-recorded, as you're aware, and that's just the nature of some of these sessions. So we're just going to make a slight edit here in the timetable just to suit people's working lives and commitments outside of the event today. So we were going to have project management for the new normal. So I'm going to just move to the next session, which is Al Dunn's session on tuning into project management. So Al takes a very different perspective. He's coming from a radio, from a television, and he's looking really at setting up those ventures in terms of a project. So it's not always developing a vaccine or a construction of a building. Projects happen in many guises, and Al is going to take a very different perspective on his view on project management. So we'll take that one now, if that's okay, Alex, please. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm Al Dunn, and I'm delighted to take part in Envision 2030, tuning into project management. This particular session, project management from a personal perspective. From my perspective, my background is in radio. From a project management perspective, I'm going to talk about opening up a radio station. I've been involved in a number of radio stations. I started working on the radio as a kid in the Pirates in Dublin in the 80s, and then was part of the team that set up Atlantic 252, which was a radio station that broadcast from Ireland into the UK very successfully. At our height, we had about 6 million listeners in the UK. Following that, I was a co-founder and executive director of Q102, which is still on air in Dublin, and co-founder and programme director of 4FM, which broadcast to Dublin, Cork, Limerick and Galway. I was involved in those radio stations in totally project management, particularly in the programming area, in the setup, in getting the license, and then in the setup as well. So let's go back to the beginning. How do you get a radio license? Well, firstly, the Broadcast Authority of Ireland advertises for a particular license. Licenses, 20, 30 years ago, they were called a license to print money, because as soon as you opened up a radio station, you could generally get an awful lot of advertising in. It's not the same today. But the BAI, Broadcast Authority of Ireland, would advertise for a specific license. You then had to put together a very detailed application outlining your business plan, outlining your programming, outlining everything to do with the radio station. You can see in the cutaway here that it's a fairly extensive books And then there's a huge amount of project management in the first place in putting those books together, because you have to get your business plan together. You have to speak to people who build studios. You have to speak to all the advertisers to see what they may spend with you when you open up this particular radio station. You've got to do an awful lot of research to find out if there are enough people who are interested in listening to that kind of radio station, because if they're not, well, then you're not going to make money out of it. So that's the application process. That application, that book, goes into the Broadcast Authority of Ireland, who have a read of it, along with anyone else who has applied for that particular radio license. And you could be up against 50 people, you could be up against 2 people. They take a look at the books, and then they decide whether any of those make sense for the listening public and from a business point of view. If they don't shortlist anybody. And that has happened before. Luckily enough, in both the cases which I worked on, the Q102 and 4FM, both were shortlisted. The shortlist then means you have to present to the board of the Broadcast Authority of Ireland. So you have to present your book to them. Which means, again, they're public showcase, effectively. I think we did ours in the Conrad Hotel in Dublin, where you stand up in front of the board, you go through your plan, you have 20 minutes to go through the plan. If you go more than 20 minutes, well, then you're cut off. That's it, because everybody only has 20 minutes. We were up against 4 other people, I think, in both cases. You do your 20 minutes, and then there's a 20-minute questions and answers, followed by follow-up questions. And you can see by the book that's on screen now, the follow-up questions can be just as lengthy as the actual application itself, and they're detailed, and you've got to go through everything. You do all of this, then the Broadcast Authority of Ireland board decide who is going to get the license. Again, luckily enough, in our case, we won the license for Q102. We won the license for 4FM as well. All of that is put together. All of that is exceptionally detailed. That's a huge project to manage in the first place. But then you have the radio station. That's when the work really starts. Only you don't have a radio station. What you have is a license to build a radio station. What you have, and the beauty of doing the application in the first place, is a plan. But that plan was generated between 1 month and 18 months previous. That's the length of time that whole process takes. And a lot of things can change within that time. So now we have the license. We have to work the plan. We've planned the work. We have to work the plan. Everything needs to be re-looked at. The CEO is the main project manager. The commercial director, well, he's looking after all advertising and marketing. The program director, that's my job, is looking after programming and studios. The accountant is there, and he's going to make sure that we're all keeping to budgets. First thing we have to do is find a building, because again, remember, this application was written probably 6 to 12 months beforehand. Any buildings that we would have looked at, and there were buildings in the application, there has to be, and they were costed, but they're well gone at that stage. So we have to find a new building. That's the first thing you have to do. And generally, it's ideally a new build, but one way or the other, you're going to have to go in and gut it and put studios in and put all sorts of bits and pieces in for a radio station. So that's the first thing you need to do. Find your building, then you need to get a good architect and work with him to design the studios. Architects are very good at design. They don't necessarily know an awful lot about radio or how studio works or the ergonomics of where that should be there, that should be there. So you work along with them. And we've always worked with really, really good architects to put together really nice studios. The design is hugely, hugely important. Weekly meetings take place between all of the people who are involved in this. Programming and studio build go hand in hand. So I needed to get all the equipment for the studio, and I needed to hire programming staff at the same time. As far as transmitter equipment is concerned, what's in the book generally is what you end up doing, because transmitter equipment doesn't change that much. So that's taken care of more or less. The studio equipment, however, what you had in the book was, again, 6 to 12 months old. That does change quite quickly, and you can save an awful lot of money on that. So you head off to the IBC show. It's a big equipment show yearly, in generally somewhere around Europe. I think it was in Amsterdam, the last one I went to. So you go over there, you check out all of the latest equipment, the playout systems, everything, mixing desks, they're all there, and you pick up your equipment effectively. Anytime I've gone over for opening up a radio station, I've generally gone with our studio consultant, who's also our transmitter guy, our TX guy as well. So you go over, you do the deal on all this equipment, then you need to come back and speak to carpenters to build the systems that this equipment is going to sit into. Mixing desks are different sizes. All playout systems are all different sizes. Microphones are different. All of these things need to be put together, and the building guys, they do that. So that's all part of the project management. While that's going on, you need to be hiring people so that when you go on the air, you have staff to present the programs. You start off with your known names. Again, going back to say 4FM, for example, we hired the likes of Tom McGurk he did the rugby on the TV, Derek Davis, we had Damien Kybert, we had Gareth O'Callaghan, a load of other known names. They're the guys you go after first. There were a load of known names that we went to and wouldn't join us for various reasons. Maybe they were earning enough money where they were, or maybe they just didn't fancy the change. They were happy where they were. You get them first, then you get your secondary presenters. And I'm not being unkind to them because I would have been a secondary presenter. You hire all of them and you fill up the schedule. Then you need your news staff, probably working at the same time. I was very lucky in the last station that we opened up. I had a very good director of news who was also my deputy program director. So she looked after an awful lot of that. I had an awful lot of input into it, obviously, but I trusted her an awful lot, and she went and hired most of the news staff. There's producers. There are production staff. All of these people have to be hired and got in, which is something that takes an awful lot of time to go through all the CVs and pick out the right people that are going to work for you. Now, once you have all of them, you're getting close to the date of coming on air. Now, you've promised the Broadcast Authority of Ireland that you are going to be on a certain day, and you more or less have to be on that day. I think, to be fair, the last one we opened up, we were about a month late because obviously things don't necessarily go to plan, but you need to keep as tight to that date as you possibly can, because that's all part of your licensing deal. You get a license to go on a certain date. About 3 weeks beforehand, 2 weeks beforehand, the transmitters go live, because you have to test the transmitters to make sure there's nothing going to go wrong with them. The last thing you want is to do all your marketing. You come on a certain day and the transmitter breaks down that day or 2 days later when people are giving you a go for the first time. So you try them out for about 2 weeks to make sure that they are working. At the same time, probably a week beforehand, you start dry running inside in the radio station. What that means basically is you start programming, only it's not going out on air, but it is going out internally, and it's getting the presenters used to doing their program, used to working with the producers. It's getting the news guys working, it's getting all the staff working together so that when it does go on air, it sounds like a cohesive unit. So you do about a week of that, and that's difficult enough to do for talk programs particularly. It's easy if it's music programs because you're just spinning music. If you're doing talk programs, you have to find people to interview, and it's difficult enough if you're just try running and people don't have any reason to come in really to be interviewed because nobody is going to hear them. However, we did that for about a week. On the day you are going live, your license begins at midnight on that day, so technically you're live from that day. Not technically, you are live from that day. You wouldn't necessarily, I certainly didn't on any of the stations we opened up, put anybody on from midnight till 6 in the morning. We just had music on as it happened, and then from 6 in the morning you come on with your big bang, with your big name presenter, and you now have a business, you're in business, you are a fully fledged radio station, and hopefully nothing will break down, and you'll have your nice marketing plan to go around it to tell people to tune in, and hopefully you will end up making a few quid from the advertising that will come in as well. That was a brief overview of the project management of opening up a radio station. I do hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed the last 10 minutes. I mean, it was concentrated into a small amount of time. I'm Al Dunn. Thank you for asking me to take part in Envision 2030, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, so that's quite a presentation from Al. So as somebody, as probably most of the audience know very little about project management, what I would certainly take from Al's presentation is, number one, the complexity. All projects are far more complex than we realize. We hear the same issues of working to schedule, working to cost, working to complexity. And the other thing that I think is very interesting for when we have such a wide audience of project managers, it is pretty clear project management skills are transferable from one industry to another. So while certainly I don't understand radio communications and the complexity of that, in terms of the challenges and in terms of how we go about looking at those and how we solve them, I certainly took a lot from that. So I think it's very interesting that we take diverse topics like that on International Project Management Day, and we look at things beyond the traditional role of change management, design and build, or IT projects. Now, so our next presenter is going to be John Robert, who we will add up here. So John, good to see you again. Unfortunately, only virtually. It's been many years since I visited India to work with you in Sun Pharma. It must be about 5 years ago at this stage. So I have to say, it's today, I believe, is the Festival of Lights in India. So happy Diwali Day. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay. How are you?
Absolutely. And thank you, John. Happy Project Management Day to all of you and John, as well as happy Diwali. As you said, it's a festival of lights. You might be hearing some background noise in between. It's perfectly okay.
No problem.
Cracking, the light festival and other things are going on.
Oh, yes.
If it is going a little bit beyond tolerable limit, please let me know. I have to change my device.
We, like all project managers, we have contingency, John. So
Yeah,
don't worry. I must say, you're being very modest. You've written a number of excellent books in project management. I hope you'll be sharing some of those. So you've written a recent book during the pandemic. Some people became gardeners or cooks. You decided to write another book. So you wrote Project Management for the New Normal, I believe. And I hope you will share some insights from that. So I'm going to wait here till you get your slides up, John, to make sure everything is working. And then I'll hand over to you.
Okay.
Okay. Perfect, John. That looks great. I'm going to step into the background. Best of luck.
Wonderful. Thank you. And happy International Project Management Day to everyone. I'm delighted to be a part of this session, and thank John for creating such a wonderful interaction between the global project management community. So the topic of this session is project management for the new normal. We have been using set of rules, set of beliefs, set of toolkits in the normal way of life. But whether is it still relevant is the question behind this entire concept. And this session is about how do we unlock opportunities. Countries are unlocking shopping malls and other things. How do we unlock opportunities which is available within the project? And then how do we make it more positive project management is what we are going to discuss about today. So I was thinking about if Da Vinci wanted to draw a project manager's anatomy, how he would have drawn. He would have certainly put a triangle there and then say that a project manager works within scope, time, and cost. And very aptly, there are multiple hands and multiple legs because project managers are always overbooked, and then they run behind meetings, they run behind agendas, they coordinate between multiple stakeholders, they are double booked, triple booked. If you see it in your calendar, you will realize that. Project management is something like snake and ladders in today's world. It used to be, but more snakes are appearing now in the post-pandemic era, right? So if you just consider this as a childhood game, we start the project at the kickoff and then we just progress there. And there are multiple ladders are available, the best resource assigned to your project, and we do a proper planning. These are some of the things which can take your project forward. And there are some snakes, assumptions goes wrong, and then procurement delay happens, and then rejection of the input material, key people leaving the organization. Now pandemic hitting very hard, and then the suppliers, the entire supply chain getting disturbed, project terminated because of cost overrun or because of priority. So all these kind of snakes drags the project down. And there are also some black swans, and it is not a new species for project management community. Communication gaps and certain assumption goes wrong will make a project stand at that particular place. So let's do one thing. So I was internalizing a lot on this, and then these are the various dimensions of a project, right? The scope, time, cost, quality, risk, communication, procurement. So if you have to, let's play a little game, and if you can answer the questions through the chat box, that will be great. So when you hear the word scope, what comes to your mind? You can just make it as a phrase, adding one more word to that. For example, when I hear scope, immediately what comes to my mind is scope creep, right? So when you hear the phrase time, cost, quality, risk, communication, and procurement, what is that comes to your mind? You can note it down in a piece of paper, or you can just keep on typing that in the chat box. Scope management, right, Cham? Thanks for that. Yeah, scope management is a good answer. And let me probably switch back to this view so that I'm seeing the comments. All right. So what comes to our mind normally as a project management professional are this. When you hear about time, you have time delay, right? Cost, immediately what comes to our mind is cost overrun. And requirements, thanks Bruna. Scope, size, Lola, thanks for that. Quality issues, risk response, communication gaps, procurement delays. Is that something which is common? Is that some a common vocabulary what we are using in our shop floors every day in, day out? And if you look at all these responses, except for risk response, what I had at least in my mind are all related to some limitations, some constraints, some other negative, pessimistic things, isn't it? And particularly, pandemic has added a lot of pessimism into the projects, the way in which we run our projects. So how pandemic affected our projects? So one side, there are dropped projects. There's a need for having lean manpower. Priority changes. Some of the companies shelve off their long-term priority, and then they give priority to the quick wins, the short delivery projects. The entire globe struggles in terms of delivering the project. Stuart giving thanks for the time constraint. Yeah. And the other side, the entire value chain got hit. The OEM struggled to supply the material, the clinical research organizations, the contractors. If you have outsourced some of the software development, governments and policymakers struggle to make a policy and then allow projects to go on. The entire supply chain got hit. The other side, there is also a reduced capex cycle. There are a lot of capex projects which are getting down. Priority to the most profitable operations rather than projects. And the last, but not the least one, is what's in it for me. There are missed incentives, bonuses, and then missing appraisals and promotions, which is not only happening in project managers' life, it's happening across the organization. It also happens to the people who are executing the projects, right? So the challenge is that how project manager with this kind of setup drives his or her project towards creating that value. So this is one side of the pendulum. The other side of the swing pendulum is also happening. That's where we are saying it's a swinging situation. The other side is that while the projects are dropped, there are urgent products which are coming. I am coming from pharmaceutical industry, so I know there are a lot of interest in making new products, hydroxychloroquines, remdesivir, vaccine, and people drive this project in record speed. I know a company, one of my colleagues is working there. Within 48 days, they have actually manufactured remdesivir. It's in normal project management context, it's impossible. Now, we take at least 2 months for planning the project itself, right? So I have interviewed them and then say that what kind of project management practice you have used in order to deliver these projects in a record speed. Some of the vaccine manufacturing facility. I myself building along with my team a vaccine manufacturing facility, and then there are a lot of vaccine research which is going on. All of us must be knowing in one way or other as being a project manager. So I was curious in asking them what is the PM methodology they have used. A couple of guys told that they actually don't have time for proper planning. They just got into the business. They are fixated on the objective, what has to be delivered, and it has to be delivered yesterday. It's super urgent. So they get onto the execution immediately, and then they progressively elaborate that, and then they deliver it. That's how many of these companies have delivered. And the other side also, digital enablement is happening. Working from home is becoming more popular. The entire value chain is having digitally enabled. A lot of artificial intelligence, digitalization stuffs are coming in. Capacity need, there is also a huge capacity need for supplying particularly these pandemic related aspects. And then even in information technology, there is a huge surge in the digitalization project, so we need so much of capacity over there. So one side, pandemic has adversely impacted on project management fraternity. The other side, it also created a huge opportunity for us to perform, which says that the project management is one of the new advanced cognitive skill which every company is prioritizing to reskilling their employees. So this has become now the main stage in order to not only solve the problem, in order to run the business going forward. Projects are temporary endeavor. We know that definition from PMBOK, but project managers are not. Individual projects have definitive start date and end date, but project management continues. So in that environment, how are we having a good framework to continue the business, to deliver the value, is a question which we are trying to answer. So if we wanted to compare normal business, normal in the sense, I would say it's before the pandemic, and then new normal is when we are handling that today, how it is different. The normal project management is more on safeguarding projects from wrong, protecting the project against the time overrun, against the cost overrun, against the scope creep. But the new normal requires project managers or project management to enable right things to happen to projects. So it's all kind of, two sides of same coin, but it's about how do we approach this particular stuff. For example, we are so passionate about controlling time, controlling cost, controlling scope, right? This is the triple constraint which we are very familiar about it. So the new normal requires people to increase velocity instead of controlling time. As I told, some of the companies made vaccines, they created facilities for vaccines, they have made some medicines for the treatment in a record speed. So increasing velocity is the foremost important thing. Similarly, instead of controlling costs, the companies are willing to spend millions of dollars now on new projects, but enhancing value created out of each of these dollars is what needs to be focused. And also, instead of controlling the rigid scope stuff, focusing on the purpose. We talked about OKR, right? Objectives and key results. Focusing on purpose, what is the project is set to deliver? That's what is becoming more important and new normal. So I call this as, instead of operating on triple constraint, operating on triple opportunities. So triple opportunities has three sides. One is increasing velocity, another is enhancing the value, and third dimension is focusing on the purpose. Another thing is missing process is that, so we traditionally taught that, the initial period of the project, we don't have to have a lot of efforts, but as the project progress on, as you see on your screen, the green line, as a project progress on, it kind of efforts are multiplied, and then it gets down at the time of closing out. There is a flaw here. There's a missing process over here. I would call it as setting the vision. As I told in an example, saying that people know that they have to create a vaccine, they have to deliver a vaccine or a treatment option, then they went ahead and then they delivered it in full thrust. So setting the vision for the project is becoming much more important nowadays than any other time in the history. So we know projects are compared with relay race, right? So projects are run by various stakeholders, and then baton is passed one after another. So there is a proper methodology actually we put together called Projects at the Rate of Relay Race. And that's my third book, which John was talking about, and then he has also written a preface to that. Thanks, John, for that. So it basically deals that industrial revolution has improved the operations a lot, but how do we kind of take that leap of improvement in project? So that is what I call it as unfinished agenda. This method talks about co-creating a large project through relay race principles, like Usain Bolt outperformed his own individual record. Finally, I just wanted to conclude with some of the thought. Project management is, I'm not seeing that is anymore as a job, but it's a passion. Like you see a photographer here, so he is in the swamp. A lot of leeches are there. It's uncomfortable situation. He has protective gears, but when he produce a beautiful image of this kingfisher, that's what his passion is about. So when we have passion, all the kind of pressures what we have, all the kind of stress what we have in our profession goes off, and then we tend to enjoy our job, and then we deliver it. So there are couple of other principles, like how do we handle successes and failures, and how do we become more decisive, how we rehumanize the entire process, how do we become very transparent and then maintain the integrity, succeed with the integrity. And finally, as the previous speaker spoken, project management is no more seen as a management per se, it's about leadership. We have to progress from a management to the leadership level. With that, I would see if Da Vinci wanted to draw a Vitruvian man for project managers, he would certainly write that a good project manager for the new normal is focused on purpose, and he improves the velocity, he adds the value, and he have a vision, and he have a passion to transform the vision into the action. We have seen triple opportunities. We have also seen about the leadership journey. Volunteerism is something which we could use in the new normal in order to create a visible change in the way in which we are driving projects. To much more emphasize on vision, the vision boards, there are some tools which are available which we can use. Asset ownership is something which you can bring in order to create the ownership. We spoke about a lot of risk management, right? So I have not seen, we are talking about serendipity management, right? So some of the examples what I have told you in the earlier about vaccine and all, it's a serendipity. There's a crisis, but the crisis brings up opportunity as well. There are blank check funding happening for projects. A CEO comes up saying that, I sign on a blank check, but you deliver this project like that. So serendipity management is another thing which we can focus on. So all these things I consolidated together and then published in a new book. People who are interested, you can have a look at it. You can connect with me in my website, and then you have all the contacts over here. And let me here pause, and then if there is any question, John, I'm willing to take.
Okay, John, great. Thanks for that. I suppose just a question I might just ask is, how do you see project management changing as a result of the pandemic? Will it change? I suppose that's your book's about the new normal. So what's your prediction in less than a minute or 90 seconds of what that new normal will be?
Yeah, so in the new normal, as people are working in remote, and then as OEMs are spread about the globe, there is much more interaction, much more coordination, much more converging is required. So in my opinion, and also that's why I showed the McKinsey's survey, companies are investing much more onto project management. The project managers will be most needed, and I'm seeing that they will be having the center stage going forward in terms of driving the growth of organizations.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, John, well, listen, thanks so much for your presentation. It sounds like there's a great party outside. It's either a war zone or it's a hell of a party in the background. So you told us a party, so we'll take your word for it. So we will let you go and enjoy your festival of lights. I'm just looking at the time; it's around 7:30 p.m. or something like that in India. Is it? What time is it there now?
It's 8:30 p.m.
8:30.
It's 8:30 p.m. It's a party time. It's no more.
You're late for the party. If it's 8:30, John, we better let you go. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Nice meeting you, and then thank you, John, for this opportunity.
We'll chat again. Okay. Thanks so much. Okay. So we have one recorded presentation here, guys. We're going to play next. It's quite a short one, but a very important one. And it's here really looking at the prioritization of team and how we focus on that. So we'll add John's video, if that's okay, Alex, onto the list, and I'll pop in the background. Thanks, guys.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Grant, and I am the alcoholic beverage category lead for Kerry, Europe and Russia, having worked in Kerry for the last 8 years. I have been invited along today to make a video focused primarily around strategy, focus and prioritization, and the role of a project manager and or leader in strategy. For me, it breaks down very easily into two very distinct parts of strategy. That is the strategy planning and creation, and then the strategy execution. Within the strategy planning portion of the section, the role of a leader and the role of a project manager is to really try and be as neutral as possible and act as the filter and the person that helps consolidate the views of everybody in the business towards that. So while there are multiple points of views, multiple agendas, multiple customers and so on and so forth, when everybody comes together, we should be able to consolidate that down into a simple and understandable strategy that works for the region or works for the broader part of the business and incorporates everybody else's strategy at the same time. So it's a simple, consolidated view of where everybody is going. Now that is easier said than done, but the role of a project manager and a leader in strategy planning is a facilitator, a coordinator, and somebody that can take all of the inputs, consolidate them, and create some simple pillars or simple portions of that strategy that allow people to understand very clearly across all places where we're focused and what we're doing. And the strategy is not only representative of where we plan to go, but how we plan to get there. And that's then where the strategy execution piece comes into play. For a project manager and a leader, where you go from being the coordinator and consolidator, you go to being the owner of that execution of the strategy and driving its progression and keeping anybody on track with regards to it. The key points here that I see in terms of the execution are very much linked to simplicity. If you have a simple, clear, and easily understood strategy as part of your outputs from your planning process, this then gives everybody a very clear view of where they need to focus and prioritize. If you can summarize your strategy in an elevator pitch that everybody within your organization understands it, they themselves can make the decision on where to focus and where to prioritize because they understand the strategy. They understand the plan. They understand where we're going, how we're going to get there, and most importantly, they're part of the how. They're part of how they're leading towards that strategy. They're part of the how in getting there on the journey. Generally, the why is relatively the same across the board. We want to grow our business. We want to gain more traction. We want to break into new territories. We want to defend. We want to grow. We want to do this. We want to do that. People need to understand how their role fits into this, how they add to that strategy, and how they help us go along that journey. So once your strategy is relatively simple, easily understood, it's then pretty easy people to understand how. The second big piece then in terms of the execution piece is in terms of communication and the over communication of the strategy. The biggest problem with communication is people presuming that it has happened. So there is no such thing as reminding people and over communicating the strategy to make sure that everybody is aware across all parts of the organization and across all parts of your organization, requiring the functional support and requiring the people that are going to deliver the how. So in short, and thank you again for inviting me along today, at a planning level, it's all about consolidating, it's all about coordinating, it's all about making sure everybody's voice is heard so that we create a simple, easy to understand strategy as an output. Making it simple and easy to understand really supports then in the strategy execution piece, where a project manager and a leader steps up into a role of execution and delivery of that strategy. Over communicating that strategy, that simple and easily understood strategy across the business, helps all the people that are part of it understand their part in how they're going to help deliver that strategy. And it allows people to be their own boss and have their own focus and prioritization, because they understand where we're going, how we're going to get there, and their role in that. I hope that this has helped, and I realize I've said the word strategy, focus, prioritization, simplicity all over and over again, but these are really important things, and these are the things that are part of my day-to-day in terms of delivery. So I hope they help your thinking today. Take care. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. So a little bit of buffering in that video, apologies. That's just the nature of the beast. So interesting to hear business development, sales, pipeline development. So, you know, looking at project management as a capability as well. And I think this is really, I suppose, another diverse presentation where we had Al earlier talking about radio telecommunications. And this is about recognizing that projects really happen in all walks of life and in all sectors, and recognizing that the challenges in one industry sector are very similar to another. I often preach that 70% of project management challenges are people, process, and prioritization, and the technical in terms of building, radio station, business development, that's only 30% of the challenge. Okay, so we have our final panel, a long day. I get that, guys. So I hear your pain. So we're going to add in our panelists on change management. We're going to hear what all this change management business is about. So we might just give I might actually just take a slightly different tack than this one here, guys. And I might, in one sentence, define change management for me, if you would be so bold to do so. Would anybody care to take that on board? I thought you were experts, guys. I thought you were experts.
I'll jump in, John. I'll give you a very simple understanding. It's just changing the status quo, the current equilibrium.
Okay, anybody else?
Sure, John, I'll take a stab at it. Yeah. And so it is the process by which you take people through a I guess, organized way and to a new environment.
Okay, anybody else?
Yeah, I'll put a different perspective on it. So project management is delivering the outcomes. The change management it's all about the people. Mm-hmm. So very thematic there. But I've lectured various times on that, and it is all about the people. If you don't do change management, people won't come with you. Yep. You can build the best processes, but if you've got no people.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
I'd simply add it's about achieving the end result through people.
Okay, very good. So I suppose as a project manager, I'm process driven, but recognizing change management complements it. So I certainly take that on board. Anybody else?
I would agree with Carl. I think it's bringing people on the journey, and we look at this as a journey, and what's the end state of that journey.
Yeah, and John, the only thing I'd add is I think they're mutually complementary. One is not going to work without the other. So I think sometimes on the change management side, we have to remember the discipline of project management, and on the project management side, make sure we're looking after arguably the softer stuff in inverted commas.
Okay. Anybody else care to jump in? Have everyone? Okay. So my next question for you: digital transformation has always been perceived as requiring a change management function. But what we actually saw in the pandemic was, with zero change management, zero project management, zero budget, zero risk assessment, we saw 10 years of digital transformation happen almost overnight. How did that come about?
I'll kick off maybe. And I think this is one of the difficulties that we have moving back to the non-working from home environment. I think we had a sense of purpose about what we needed to achieve, and I think there was a greater sense of purpose around protecting people, ensuring people were safe, and I think that was one of the fundamental pieces that allowed people to change very quickly because they saw the greater good in it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can sort of connect with Bernard, right? So typically when you're thinking about change, you always think about what is the case, the business case for change, right? Now, in this particular instance, you can sort of look at it from an opportunity perspective, or you can look at it from a burning platform, right? So with the pandemic, the burning platform was very clear for us that if we don't sort of, conform, right, to working from home, it's a situation of life and death, right? So I think it's very easy in terms of transformation and disruption that the stakes are very high, the risks are very high. So it doesn't take a lot for people to actually jump into that journey of change. So that's really what happened with pandemic. We really didn't have much of a choice. The stakes were high.
Okay.
I think another way of looking at that, John, that's okay. I mean, there's obviously the phrase "necessity is the mother of invention."
Yeah.
I think it's also the father of change. I think in this instance we had to change. There was no. Anyone who's going to resist it, either wasn't going to work or be left out in the cold. And as Hardeep, sorry, I hope I get that right. As Hardeep said, there was the health element side of it as well.
Okay, I really liked your quote, Neil. You have to tell me that one again. I didn't fully capture. What did you say?
Necessity is the mother of invention. Therefore, it could be the father of change. I just made that second bit up.
Okay. We'll trademark that for you. We have our legal people working on it as we speak. Very good. I like it. Okay, anybody else, guys? Because that's really the crux of it. That's digital transformation is supposed to be the biggest change management initiative. People have struggled for years, put millions or maybe billions in it. And basically every community center, every country, every individual said, hey, presto, we're now digital. We've transformed. Any other learning from it?
And one comment I would make, John, around the digital transformation, right? So I don't think so. We've clearly achieved, right, what we set out for our digital transformation. One of the struggles I sort of reflect on is really we don't transform the processes and then we expect the transformation to happen. So for any change or any sort of disruptive transformation, we always want to look at your processes first, and then you get your people along with it. So just wanted to sort of point that out around digital.
Okay, great.
I'd agree as well with Hardeep. I think we've seen some change in terms of our proximity. We're moving into that sort of digital space ourselves. We're having a conference here, a panel discussion online. Maybe the pieces in the background that organizations are actually trying to change, get onto a completely different way of presenting their products to the marketplace and things like that. I'm sure the problems are still there in all of those large digital projects. We've managed to do this working from home piece, which is I think is different, but it does move us certainly on that journey.
Yeah, I think that's a balance point that we have a way to go. I think is, and when we get there, we'll find that the business and customers and society requires us to go another step. So I do think we are definitely in an era of accelerated and constant change. So I might just move to our questions that are coming in via LinkedIn. So I'm just going to pop them up on the screen. It's always easier for people to see them. So I'm going to take Bruna's question first. And I think this really is the crux of, why change doesn't work. So Bruna asked the question, what is the best way to implement change without creating resistance? So I think the question really is, you're always going to have resistance. It's the default mode. What do we do? And I might jump in on that and just say, I'm expecting to hear things about communication, stakeholder engagement, but you guys are experts in this. You're going to tell me so much more than that, I hope.
So I'll jump in first there. I feel that pause. Yes, communication, stakeholder engagement. And I'm so glad you said engagement, not manage. I'll come on to that later. But it's answering the question, what's in it for me? So if change is coming down the road, is going to hit you in one way or another. The question everybody goes is, well, what does it mean to me? Because it's deep and it's personal and it's all about me when I'm asking the question. So if we're briefing staff or briefing supply chains or briefing leaders on what the change means, answer that question, what's in it for them and when and how, and what do they need to do to respond to it, and present all that information in their language. I don't mean French, English, German, Dutch, whatever. I mean, what's in it? What does it mean to them? Don't speak the language of project management. If we're talking to a load of finance clerks, tell them about what's happening to their job and what it means in terms of processes and what they're going to do, and treat people as people. Just put yourself in their shoes and go, if I was doing their job, what would I need to know about this change that's coming down the line?
Okay.
And it's a
Anybody
really
else?
simple
Sorry.
concept.
Okay, very good. No. So I actually, to be honest, I'm here to learn as well, and I'm taking notes to learn. I'm super selfish here, guys. So and the key thing I think there is what I would take from Carl's. I'm trying to summarize it in a way I will understand and remember it, and it's clearly Carl has conveyed very well. You got to give people a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm taking from it, and it's great to hear that. So while I am giving you guys a hard time, I know very little about change management. I'm here to learn. So you are welcome to throw a rock back over the fence if you need be, or even a grenade if that's what it takes.
I think,
John, I won't throw a rock, but I'll add to what Carl said. Fully agree with what Carl said. I think there's a bit, and this depends on the nature of the change. There's a bit which is the more you can get people to co-create the change, to use the word purpose, more people are brought in early to actually co-create that, the more they have the chance to get buy-in. So it feels it's part of them creating it as opposed to landing on them. And everything Carl said is agree. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes there's particular changes that are maybe very difficult, in organizational turnarounds, or your previous question where organizations may be on the brink of collapse and you've just got to move very quickly, or you've got to come with some very difficult news. But I think to the question, I think that it's gone from the screen. If you want to try and overcome resistance, people need to feel they've actually created it and they've had a chance to influence it. They may not get everything they want, but if they've got that chance and they see their voice in it, then you've got a much better chance to overcome the resistance.
Yeah, I think there's probably a tipping point as well. And I think a lot of studies have looked at this, and they say that if you want to change the culture of an organization, you're talking about culture as well here in terms of moving people through change, you need to involve 20 to 25% at least before you'll actually achieve some resonance with that transformation or change. So I think it's important to understand the mechanic of this in terms of how many people you need to involve. So if it affects everybody in the organization, the chances are you're going to have to really, really get a lot of people in there to actually contribute to it and co-create, as Joe has said. I think, taking up Carl's point, the point for me would be that people don't feel change is being done to them, but that they are actually very much part of that change. And that sentiment is really important, I think, in terms of being successful at the end.
Okay, I think you're earning the big money we're paying you, Bernard. That's why we flew you in by private jet. No,
If I could take that one step further, I agree with the previous comments. Carl stole my phrase, "What's in it for me?" That is something that I use a lot when you're talking to people. To take that to the next level, things that we've done in the past is define. Once you've got you've got the people who can be your champions and get on board, and I think that's a really important point. Change is not being done to people. Is actually define who those change champions are in different groups. So you're actually feeding the seed then into different areas if it's a widespread change. And you can do that on different levels. You could do that across a whole organization. You can do that in a group. You can do that in a project team. There's different ways of doing that. And I found that to be very successful.
Yeah. Okay. So if I can add, right? So I think everyone knows that when you think about change, it's really disruption of your expectations, right? So and we know that resistance is very normal. You have an expectation, things are not going your way, or something's changing, you are going to face resistance, right? The key is how to manage it. So one of the things that I've used in the past is really the clarity, right? The intent and the clarity of what you are trying to achieve. So the clearer the path to the change is, the more sort of collaboration you are going to get from your colleagues, your peers, and everybody who's involved in the change. So one of the things that I'm constantly focusing on is really making sure that the communication is very consistent, and it's really sort of enhancing it multiple ways and saying it at different multiple ways, because over communication is never an issue here. So resistance is always going to be there, which is the question asked, right? However, I think the one way to sort of manage that is the clarity of the intent of what you are trying to achieve. Because the clearer the path to the changes, the less resistance you're going to get. It's actually inversely proportional. There is an equation that Connor formulated.
Okay, very good. I don't know hog the questions. I'm learning loads from you guys. We could have done a full afternoon on this. So I'm going to look at the questions because they're building up in the background. So I'm going to pop the questions up. So that was a question from Bruno we had on the whole area of resistance to change. So Paula's next question here: how would you ensure that everyone is involved is well informed about the change? So I suppose it comes back to those opening words of stakeholder and communication. We get that, but take Paul's question: how do we ensure good communication with stakeholders?
Yeah. I think your leaders have a real role in this space. It has to come from every level in the organization, and very often the people who are key in this are the people who are the direct line managers of individuals, because they are the ones that translate the message, maybe that's at the top coming down, and they translate it. So I think it's really important for them to have a framework where at the very least there's a common set of messages. There's maybe ways of having good conversations with people. We hear about the books about the good conversations and all of that, and making sure that it's a consistent message right across the board, so that when we go out and we're at the water cooler and we're talking to Hardeep or Carl or Joe, that we're not having a different message coming at us from a different team because that was the way their manager presented it. So it's really important about the consistency, that it comes right through all of the levels.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can I just build on that, because that's looking very inward at the firm. But when in Paul's question he says everyone involved, that needn't necessarily be everyone in the business, because there's people outside of the business that are impacted by the change or are impacting on the change. So we need to have different strategies for engaging with them. That top-down cascade still actually applies, and the consistent messaging applies. But it's about looking internally and looking externally. So building up a communication strategy that suits the way that people want to receive information. It might be stick it on a website and it's a broadcast. It might be direct emails. We all get overloaded on emails. I don't recommend that. But different communications channels will suit different audiences. So there's a bit about know your audience or know your customer, and how you communicate that out. So customers particularly, if we're changing our business, who does it affect out there in the big bad world that we need to communicate to? So do look inside and look outside as well when you're thinking about everyone in terms of Paul's question.
Yeah, two things I'd like to add. I mean, to Carl's point, which is a brilliant point. So I work in HR, and I think Bernard, from our introduction to your HR as well, so we might tend to look a little bit too much internally. To your point, I think that mix of voices can really help each other. So customers come in and saying, here's what we're seeing, what's working, what's not working. And we've done that. I work in Microsoft. We've done that a lot, and we really expose ourselves in terms of good changes we're making, but also some things we need to continue doing. And actually hearing a customer telling you that is incredibly powerful. And then vice versa, the customers hearing the reality of what we're trying to do and some of the things we've got to work through internally. I think the other thing, and we noticed this a lot with COVID, and back to the question around digital transformation, if I take Paul's question very literally, how would you ensure people are involved? You've got to check that. You've got to test it. So you've got to do that qualitatively in terms of the types of conversations. Bernard mentioned the water coolers, team meetings, whatever it is, but also more and more, how do you do that quantitatively and how do you measure it? So, for example, one of the things we noticed during COVID was when we were seeing how people were responding to working from home, we started to notice our manager population was less positive than what we call our individual contributors, so in other words, non-managers, in terms of work-life balance. So everybody was great in terms of productivity, but actually our individual contributors were finding their work-life balance was a little bit better than the managers, because the managers were taking all of that out on themselves. So just to the question, we measure that, then we understood it, then we can do something about it. So to really think about how you measure both qualitatively, but also use data where you can as well.
Yeah. If I can just chime in, right? So Paul's question about everyone, I've used actually reverse strategy. I've actually gone to the individuals and look at the change impacts, because the messaging needs to be tied to that particular segment of the population, right? So if your impact, is sort of giving you a different direction, the communication needs to be targeted that way. So it's all tied to the communication strategy, but I think it's a reverse strategy, and I've always found that very, very helpful.
Okay. So there's a massive queue of questions, guys. You've lit a fire with those sparks. So we'll keep going. So next question from Roy then. So Roy, being a project manager, he always wants to know about the implementation, or what do you address. So the question here, in presenting a proposed change to a business, what's the most important element to address? So let's try and identify what are the top three when you're driving a change initiative in a business.
I think Carl touched on it earlier on around, let's remember it's not everyone's people, it's all about people. And I think, Ben, as you may have touched on culture, I think they're two really important elements that people forget. And I've got a recent example where we've been talking to an IT team who are delivering an IT project, and this is all going to go well. It's a new IT platform. And when the Project Foundry, when we went in there, we asked the question, so what about the people? As you looked at the impact on people, and we got a bit of a light bulb moment where they were like, oh, yeah, we didn't really think of that side of it. So then you start asking the questions of what's the impact, and again, from Carl's earlier point, what's in it for me, for the individuals, and what motivates those particular individuals. I think they're two key elements to that answer: people and culture.
Just to add to that, John, and what Neil said there, my own experience in running an SME where change can be difficult. I've led a change initiative in the business for the last 3 years, and it's really to change the culture. And we ran up against a lot of roadblocks from individuals about, what's wrong with the culture. But there was a lot wrong with the culture. So I suppose my point is that, it's not always going to be good news in terms of a change initiative in the short term. What we did try and convey to the staff is in the more medium term, or certainly beyond the next 18 months, there will be a lot of benefits for the people who remain with the business. But, from my own perspective, there was a lot of fallout from the change program, but we actually expected that and we actually wanted it. And now we're on the other side where we're getting the culture change, or we're getting the buy-in to where we want the business to go to. So my point is, sometimes you go through a lot of negative and a lot of obstacles in change progress before you come out the other side.
It sounds a bit like doing a master's in project management. It's a good idea at the beginning. It's hell during it, but somehow it should become somewhat worthwhile only after graduation day. So there's lots of people on this who can relate to that, the difficulty of having evenings and writing papers, etc. So the audience here, you're paying. So I'll keep moving, you guys, because we have a massive list of questions. There's at least 10 questions in the chat, so we will require a change management process to accelerate things. So, yes, we have to begin with the end in mind, isn't it? Now, so this is again, I like these. These are I accept change management can be somewhat fluffy in that it's hard to pin down, and again, the softer stuff is always the harder stuff. I get that, but what we're seeing here is almost kind of an understanding of that, and people are taking it to the next level. So everyone is getting what I'm picking up from Seamus' question here is he gets what you're saying. There's no difficulty believing it, but they're saying even when you do all of those things, you still have resistance. So almost, how do we go to the next level in change management? So we've done the communication, we've done the stakeholder, we've top down, we've got senior management, we've presented the vision, and they're still not interested. What do you do?
Go ahead, Karen. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so Hardeep touched on it earlier about the change impact assessment. If we really understand what the impacts are, we can then be ready to address those. And I think there's a degree of honesty needed from whoever is communicating the change. For the mountain that is the project, there's going to be an upside, but there's also a downside. People know there's a downside, so let's be honest with them and go, here's the big picture. This is what we're trying to achieve, and here's the vision for where we're getting to, and bring the people on a journey with us. If they can see the end goal, or the destination that we're aiming for, then we can get people to start to buy into our vision. So we've touched on it at various points that it's not something that's being done to people. It's a journey that the business is on. And we're trying to encourage the staff or our supply chain or stakeholders, or whoever, to come on that journey with us to get to that hopefully better place.
Yeah.
And if it is a business that is changing the business model, reshaping, downsizing or growing or acquisition trail, the impacts on the individuals are all going to be different. So we need to say why we're doing that, and then about what's in it for the people, what's in it for me.
I think there's two aspects, and it's just appeared there on the question nearly. I think you have to create an environment where people can experiment in the change as well, without fear of getting it wrong or retribution. And I think there's another element I'd add to what has been said is we need to make sure that I suppose along the journey we're honest about the fact that we're going to get things wrong as well. And there are some things we're just going to get so horribly wrong, and we have to put our hand up and say, do you know what? We told you that we'd get some things wrong, and this is one of them. And, I think people appreciate that transparency and honesty rather than trying to hide behind maybe position or different things, the success of the project or whatever. I think we have to recognize that not every project swims through the lanes properly. And that somewhere along the way, we have to change tack a little bit because we made a wrong decision.
Okay. And one thing I'll just add to Bernard as well, right? So when you think about change, it is about three different components. It's the heart, and it's the mind, and it's the hand, right? So I think that's really the connection to the people side. Otherwise, everything is very mechanical. So one of the best ways I've managed resistance is really acknowledging how people feel. Now, this doesn't have to drag for months and months, but hearing people and acknowledging how they feel is the best way to sort of bring them onto the journey. So a simple, sometimes solution can really work. So, try just a voice of the customer, or just having an open forum where you actually bring people in and hear them out and let them complain about things. Because again, change is disruptive. You're sort of messing their expectations up. So something simple like that could work too.
This clearly isn't your first change management rodeo, Hardeep. When you're able to rattle off about the heart, the mind, and the heart, the mind, and the hand. I now understand how even giant organizations like Merck, and it's very clear. And just listening to you guys, but certainly just listening to that statement, you need change management champions in the organization. In fairness, these are some of the comments you guys are making, but. So it's nice to see people with a bit of passion in their profession, and it's certainly coming out in that. Okay, we'll keep going. Jump in, Joe, sure.
Yeah, very, very quick piece that Hardeep sparked in my head. She talked about, bringing people in and understand what's going on. Sometimes there's a temptation to not focus or not to listen to people who are raising issues, so who are resisting. So sometimes we just tend to say, well, at least, let's get on with it. Let's focus on wants to go. Actually, it's really important to go and spend time and understand why those people are resisting. And in certain circumstances, give them a forum. So you're better off to get it out there and understand it and spend time doing that rather than just focus on those who continue to move forward.
I think in that instance that the challenge is the quiet person who sits in the back, keeping it all in. Mm-hmm. So if you have and I know you didn't just say an open forum, Hardeep, but sometimes you need to go and have a one-to-one and say, come on, let's go for a coffee. And you can whinge at me and moan at me all you want. And then they'll take a couple of days. I worked with a guy a couple of years ago, and someone said to me, if you're going to put some change on this guy, he will embrace it, but you've got to get him to let him moan at you. And he said, tell him on a Thursday. Let him moan at you all day Thursday, all day Friday. He'll take the weekends, and by Monday, he's fully on board. And it worked. It's ad trade, but it actually worked.
Yeah. So, well, you couldn't get any better than this then, if that's the case, Neil. You have International Project Manager Day, and it's a Thursday.
There you go. Get it out there, guys. Yep.
Okay, so we'll keep going, guys. This is a hell of a question, so I'll have to take a breath for this one. So when you see OCM, you always know you're dealing with a diehard. So that's organizational change management. So that's what I picked up. Took me a few seconds to digest that one, but I have it. So let's hear what Darren's question here. So organization change management activities are the least appreciated within project management. My goodness, he's insulting us already, right? and looked as overhead and often unnecessary by senior leadership. And are there any successful strategies in convincing them of its importance? The perspectives are often focused on numbers of dollars. And I think that is a very fair point. I might just slightly digest that and saying it's very easy to sell project management to an organization because it has tangible benefits. People can see the software being developed, the IT system up and running. But remember, if we take something like IT, especially systems, it's only as good as the perception of the user. So in that scenario, management will give you plenty of money to develop the technology, but they sort of won't give you the money to develop the hearts and minds of the people using it. So how do we go about that? Great question and comment, Darren.
There's one strategy I've used, and I think Hardeep and Carl and Neil have referred to it, to look at the sort of the outcome and to work that backwards and say, well, where do outcomes come from? They come from people's behaviors. So if we don't change people's behaviors, where is the outcome going to land? And we have, I suppose, the great and the good. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. We need to change the culture when there's a change process in play. And when we look at the one strategy that certainly that I've used is looking at resetting the values of the organization. And how did we get to that point? We got to that point by doing design thinking workshops with all of our colleagues and setting out what good behaviors look like, but also setting out what poor behaviors look like as well. And I think when people begin to see some of those pieces being lined up behind an outcome, then you have a better chance of convincing people that there's a need for change management, because all of a sudden you see all of the bad stuff in the design thinking workshop and you see all of the good stuff, and people begin to realize, actually, well, how are we going to get from A to B and actually ensure that we have a different culture at the end of it? And that takes time. It takes, it's about relearning. It's about helping people change their ways of doing things, and all of that takes attention to detail. It's a project in its own right. So we're not lost on the project management, John.
Okay.
Something we do a lot. Like one of the most common questions that we ask at the Project Foundry when we're talking to new clients or talking about new projects is, what does success look like? And often the answer you get is, if we have such a system in place. And then we ask the question again, then you start asking some leading questions, and you've got to make sure you're talking to the right people as well. But asking leading questions around what Bernard just touched on there is, okay, your system might be in place, but is X going to be able to do it? Is there a training plan? Have you spoken to the individuals involved? How is this going to impact HR? How is this going to impact finance? How is this going to impact other groups? And once you start asking those leading questions, it's about getting that thought process. And I think Darren's question is accurate. I do think it's changing, though. I do think people are starting recognizing more now that change is like people accept change in different ways and at different paces and different sort of in different ways. So I think it's becoming more acceptable that change is a key element, but it's about us going in and asking those leading questions and making sure the success of the project is not just about getting that system in place or getting that software developed. It's about sustainable change.
Yeah. Neil, if I can just maybe connect with you, right? So one of the questions I ask is do you see change management as an expense or as an investment? Right. I think it's just framing it a little bit differently. So once you know where the leader is, right, if they're seeing that as an expense, you know how much work you have to do to move them to more of a investment. And clearly is this investing in your people, right? Just the same way you've invested in a piece of machine or a software, you have to invest in your people, changing their behaviors, changing their attitude, and providing them the skills and the capabilities to do their role. So either you pay now or you pay later. And the paying later means you're going to pay through resistance, right? Which comes in a lot of waste from a project management perspective, from a lean perspective. And I don't know if leaders want to hear waste. They don't like that word waste, right? So I think it's really just trying to influence them that it is better to invest in your tools and your technology and people at the same time, so you can reap the benefits of your realization at the very end of the journey.
You can turn this into an equation as well. So
yeah,
there are ways of looking at this. So there are studies done on people hacking their day job and not having the right processes and different things in place. And this is about people's behavior, maybe not using a system. And some studies have said that it's at least an hour to an hour and a half every day for every colleague that you have. Now turn that into an organization which is 10,000 strong, And all of a sudden you have a very clear imperative to invest in a process of change. And you know, that speaks in the language that our question has come from.
Okay, so I just popping up the question, guys, to keep on track of them. So we've, and it's probably a very apt question. We've wandered into that sort of overlap between project management and change management. And just as listening to you guys, one little sort of factor I might put in is when we see a significant amount of change management, such as digital transformation, you know, with the project manager's hat on, we often talk about these as being complex projects because there are known unknowns and there are unknown unknowns. So that would be certainly in wearing our project management hat. We look at change management as a source of complexity in our project as such. So I suppose and again, you know, 3 of you are die-hard project managers and 3 of you are probably from the change management. So if you want to have a row about this, I'm perfectly fine. So is change inevitable in project management environments? And I think, to be clear on this, it's not change control, which is, you know, planned versus actual. So what they're asking here is, in all project initiatives, is there an element of change management in them? What do you think of that, guys?
I don't think I've ever run a project, and I'm one of those die-hard project managers that wasn't that. I mean, walking down the road involves change. If you have to go a different way, everything in life involves change. Again, it comes back to understanding how people accept change and how quickly they will and how you can do it. But simple answer to the question is yes. Every single project I've ever done, small, medium, large, involves change to some sort, to somebody.
Yeah. And John, let me spin that differently. The project is to make change.
Correct.
Therefore, we must manage change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's simple, right?
A different view is, does the world stand still around us?
It's changing constantly, right?
Bernie, I was going to say something similar. I think sometimes, certainly, I can think about projects as being big things or big projects. The world we're in now, there's something new every day. So one of the things you've got to do is, how do you help people be adaptable to change? So how do you give them the capability to go with the flow, pick themselves up when change is happening, to deal with setbacks during the change, to be able to get back up on the horse and go again. So you actually equip people to manage change in a better way for themselves, so that you're not having to manage the change for them.
Yeah. I mean, Joe, you bring up a good point, right? One of the things that I've been working on is this concept of growth mindset, right? So it's looking at the change in a different way, because I think often feel people like it's punitive, right? Something's happening to me, right? And I'm being penalized, or, you know, you're taking something away from me. So I think it's the narrative around change as well. It's very important. So if you have a growth mindset, I think, you know, Bernard brought it around experimentation, right? Experimentation. There is a component of risk taking as well, right? And this component of how the leaders react to the risk taking. So it is all about the culture as well. But I think the narrative really helps the people to say, yes, we need to have a growth and learning mindset, which really helps us be more resilient, right? Be more sort of like, you know, we can sort of bounce back from that disruption much faster. So that has helped.
Yeah, we've embarked on a program, and maybe this is a little bit sidelong, but we've embarked on a program which is around intentional learning, which is about that growth mindset and a different way of and trying to get our managers to think about how they move people into that sort of keep them in that Goldilocks zone of learning, which is, it's not too difficult and not too easy, but pushing it to the boundary of a challenge. And ensuring that people are constantly moving and developing themselves. And there's a huge benefit for colleagues in that as well, in that their employability index remains high. They get more maybe enjoyment out of a challenging job, self-satisfaction at the end of the day when a project is done, and a whole range of different things. So it's about creating that environment which is comfortable but challenging at the same time. So.
Okay. Just a quick add-on, Bernard, actually might be interesting to you. So we've been doing a lot of work on growth mindset. I work at Microsoft as well. And one of the things we tried to help people at the start was to understand, are there times you need to be in a performance zone? So you can take a chance with this bit, you know, maybe it's a big customer deal or whatever it is. And that's okay. We recognize there's times where you don't want to take those chances. But that's important because that raises your consciousness then of the times you need to be in that learning zone and you can learn. So it might be useful to exchange notes on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we might just move to Ken's question here. So I think we're probably a few minutes behind in terms of where Ken has asked the question. So, you know, I've picked up from you guys that you definitely support the need to get all people involved in. But I suppose it comes back to that the famous question: how? Like, how do you get people who are, maybe graduates or people who are, in organizations on unfortunately we have people who have a job as opposed to a career, in that they may not have the luxury of a scaled salary or anything like that, and that's very difficult to convince people in those environments that this change is important, because most employees, and understandably so, are quite selfish. They go to work for their pay, and okay, some people love their job, but that sort of environment. So how do you tell that to sort of and I don't it's probably the wrong phrase, but it's such blue collar workers who there is a limited opportunity, or it isn't the norm that they can work their way up to senior management, where senior management are telling them this is great for the company. However, it won't be changing any pay scales for people who, work on the factory floor, for example. How do you communicate that to those people?
Yeah, I think there's a way here with using the purpose. So what is the purpose of the change? And you might say, we've many pharma companies in Ireland, as an example, and they're producing vaccines for COVID-19, and there's a production line. And it's happening on the production line. So if you can link a change in something that needs to happen on the production line, or the strategy of the company, to the greater good and the purpose, I think that's one way certainly of making sure that everybody, regardless of what level they are in the organization, and I think that's probably the starting point. And certainly, coming back to a point that I made earlier, the number of people you involve for the size of the change is so important. And if they can co-create that early on, and there's lots of different ways of doing that. People talk about these world cafes and forums and different things. There's surveys and all sorts of. There's a whole range of different devices you can use. But if you use them against that purpose and defining that purpose, and people will align themselves to that purpose in many different ways. Some people will stay in organizations, some people will leave because they don't like what you're doing, and some people will stay because maybe we're not sure just yet. So if you can get those maybe we're not sure just yet people to align to that purpose, well, then you're in a very strong position.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example, the idea of pharma, and you could say the same in a hospital. Perhaps there's people who are essentially working as cleaners in hospitals, and there's also professors, and the salary is a multiple of a multiple. But I have to say, I have been in and out of hospital just from a work perspective, or talking to pharma people, and I have to say I have got that sense of purpose where people who are working as cleaners in hospitals actually recognize they are absolutely fundamental core part of the team. So it is being done, and that's really, I asked the question is, we'll all come up with reasons as to why it can't be done, but you've just told me, and there are lots of examples in the real world how it is being done. And I think that's the key thing, is come up with reasons of why it is possible as opposed to why it is impossible to make change happen.
And one thing I'll just add to Bernard's sort of comments is really how that purpose connects to the bigger purpose, right? Because I think if you go the cleaner example, they can't understand how it's connected to the patients, right? But you have to make them understand how it's connected to the next layer and the next layer, right? It's all about my circle of influence, right? And how it connects to the bigger strategy.
I think it's about
an interesting example of that. A medical device company in Cork. I don't work with them, but I came across a peer. We did some peer connection. They actually used to get the surgeons. They made hip replacements, or whatever is used to build a new hip. They used to get the surgeons come in and actually talk about the people they'd done, and then they moved it to the customer, as in the end user. Just those. It sounds awfully simple, but it's amazing how often we don't think about it.
Yeah. Okay. So we might take a different track here, guys, if you don't mind. And this is really what we've really talked about is from a large scale, and I think, and probably from years of experience. So I suppose we're coming back to the current reality. So I suppose the question that Alex is asking there is, can organizations still foster the same level of innovation in a remote working world? So she's looking at it from the real world as opposed to the science of change management. And I think what it's asking there is about innovation in terms of your people remotely, but also how do you connect with them in that process of innovation or change management if they are working remotely?
I think it is possible, John. I think it's different, and we're all adjusting to it. I don't think it's impossible. Because you come back to what when you think about innovation can mean the most dramatic changes to incremental innovation, and that comes through connection. One of the things we've been learning is the importance, two things relevant to this question. First of all, when do we need to physically bring people together? So back to purpose, what's the purpose of physically bringing people together? And that can be, we need to do some brainstorming, so maybe some deep thinking and some collective work as an example. But then there's really good times actually when people don't need to be together, and that gives them some focus time and a chance maybe to assimilate and absorb what they're trying to work through. I think the second thing is we've got to challenge ourselves. And when I say ourselves, those of us who've worked in the industry for a long time, work and innovation, it's not somewhere you go. These are things you do. And we've got to get away from this notion that things happen in a certain place. Things can happen anywhere. So I have to say, I'm quite passionate about saying, yes, it's probably challenging and we're finding it more difficult, but it's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. And what I would say is look at the innovation in how we've worked together over the last 18 months to years. That's innovation.
Okay, I just popped that up because I thought it was really in line with what you were saying there. So we can see the idea that people don't like change, whereby I think what we've actually heard people say is they can and they do. And what do you think of that, guys? Do you think people have has our willingness to change accelerated in recent years, and not just in terms of the pandemic, but say you can take the last 5 years? Have you noticed a willingness to change?
So I think that statement is entirely true, because people are fearful of, back to what I said earlier, what's in it for me? Something's happening to me that I'm not in control of. And if we're not in control of it, we're going to fear it, as one of the questioners mentioned earlier. So people don't like change because it's, what is normal, what's around us is comfortable. It's the old analogy to an old comfy pair of slippers, should you wear slippers. You buy a brand new pair, they're not as comfortable as the old ones, or shoes or boots or whatever. So if we're taking people out of their comfort zone and moving the comfort blanket, whatever, then there's a degree of fear, of jeopardy, of oh my word, what's happening? So yeah, people don't like change because it's different. So if we can help them get over that fear, then we can take them on a journey with us, then it should be easier. But in all fields, whether it's your van drivers for Amazon, and they've got a different device, they now have to take a photo of your doorstep and sign in differently and such things, it's still a change to what they were doing. And most people will perceive a change as a threat. So we need to help them see that it's not a threat, it's just different. It's just different.
Okay.
I think that the question is absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So, let's keep going, guys. Just watching the clock here. So a great question here from John. How could you prevent some key people from leaving if they're putting... I know what you guys are going to say, so keep your powder dry for a moment. I can see somebody typing up P45s as we speak. How could you prevent some people from leaving if they're putting up a lot of resistance to change? These guys have no heart, John. They have no compassion. So just wait for the answer. Yeah.
I'm going to pop in there straight up. I'm going to say diversity actually is key to innovation and change. So if you have people resisting, the chances are there is somebody there that maybe is not being as vocal or voicing their desire to resist somewhere along the way. So how do you prevent some key people from leaving? I think you have to go back to some of the basics, and what the WIFM, the what's in it for me, and what is the outcome for them. And I think it does require a little bit more attention, but having conversations, having good, honest chats with them, I've always found helpful.
I think that's spot on. I do think, though, and you alluded to this, John, that there is at a point. Get out. You need to. Sorry, there's always going to be one.
It wouldn't be a real conference if we didn't have That makes us all feel much better, Neil. So don't worry about it.
Absolutely.
JP will have a German Shepherd jumping up on the desk in a minute or something. Don't worry.
Sorry, you alluded to it, John. At some point, you do need to just say this change may not be for you, and it's a failure when you get there. But if you tried everything, and the worst case, and Bernard may understand this more than I do, the whole passive resistance element to change, where to your face, yes, oh, brilliant, and then in the back at the water cooler, they're the ones causing all the problems and sowing the seed. Sometimes you do just need to cut the cord and say it's best for both of us. And I've done that. And I met that particular person about 2-3 years later, and he was in such a happy place. And it transpires he actually wasn't happy where he was, and that's where the resistance to change came from. So it was a win-win. You don't always get win-wins, but it was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, what I've found in some of those, just building on what Neil has said there, is you find somebody's self-purpose of what they feel, and I think we've been all examining that at home when we have the kids running around, as Neil has just had there. What's important to us, and sometimes what they're trying to do in the organization, maybe it's not what the organization is doing, but maybe it's what the organization is doing to them, maybe making them work long hours or do different things like that. Sometimes they just don't align, and they're, they may be saying, as Neil has said, this is a great change, but behind this, saying, God, we're never going to get through this. This is ridiculous because of the workload it creates. So if you find that the person is not aligned in terms of what they want to do themselves with where they want to go in the organization, Neil is absolutely right. Sometimes you just have to cut the cord.
Okay. I think once you're sure, John, that the change initiative is right for the company, and you've really delved into it at the outset, and you've got senior management buy-in. Once you can stand over it hand on heart, if there is a bit of collateral damage along the way, as Neil said, well, look, such is life. But if it is for the betterment of the company, so be it. Unfortunately.
Okay, so here's a really good one. So I think I suppose, look, we all know whether it's personal or professional or organization or individual, anything worthwhile usually takes a bit of pain and torture, and that's whether it's gaining a qualification or developing a skill, getting fit, all of these things, they do take a while. So I think what you put into it, both from an individual and an organization point of view, you get out of it. Now, this is a really, really insightful question, and it really ties the two panel discussions together. So earlier we spoke about OKRs, and now we're talking obviously about change management. So, and again, OKRs really are a strategy implementation or a strategy realization tool. And again, this is quite specific and it's quite new. And even I know some of you working for large organizations, you implement these, but you may not necessarily be directly involved in. So this is a tough question if you haven't sort of walked in these shoes. But the question is obviously being asked in there about, has anybody got any experience from using the OKR framework for change management?
I'll jump in as a linkage between the two sessions. So the question is OKR a good tool? Yes, it most certainly is. It's one of the tools in your armory of tools, in one arrow in the quiver, or whatever the saying is properly. If you are setting up a set of objectives for your team to go and do something differently, then yes, it can be a tool to use. And from the discussions we had earlier on about, you discuss the OKRs with the team, it can be quite self-directed, people can write those objectives, then it's a great way to get people to buy into the change process and help that sort of self-directed change, take people on a journey with us. So it's not the tool to use, but it is one of the tools that we can use as we go forward.
Okay, now a lot of questions, very little time. So we're going to go one question, one answer, if that's okay, guys. So you can volunteer these as you jump in. So a question from Sean O'Reilly. So perhaps you've covered this, however, if not, what is the practical approach for understanding resource capacity versus project demand? What goes where and when? Please, no theory. Good man, Sean. That's so in this case, keep it real. So world experience. So that's
one word, John. Priority.
Priority. Okay, very good. Sold to the gentleman on my right. Okay, next question. Okay, so let's see the next one. Okay, so this is just Darren from earlier. Okay. So we get lots of we've got lots of comments, not questions. So we caught up. So we did implement our change management strategy very well. So I am going to ask another question that I think we didn't cover, and it's very important. And So, I want to tie the two sessions together a little bit. In the OKR space, I pushed the panel very hard about give me practical tools, give me tangible tools. And I use the example of, a work breakdown structure, a Gantt chart, something like that in the project management space. And the guys talked to me about tools. Now, a lot of it was technology and sort of brainstorming sessions, but the one thing in the change management space, because it's much, I suppose, it's got a lot more depth in terms of it's been around for longer. But when I think of OKR, I struggle to come up with sort of OKR models of implementation. But when I think of change management, it just goes on and on. You've ADKAR, you've got Kotter, you've just got Lewins. There's a whole range of change management models out there. Nobody has mentioned them. Are they only for the textbook, or do you use them?
We use them. They can be a little bit theoretical. We use ADKAR. Two tools I would suggest. ADKAR very much at an individual level. So back to a lot of the resistance piece. The people know what they need to do, etc., etc. And I have to say, and maybe just because I grew up with it, I still think Kotter is very good. My one little asterisk beside that is back to one of the points earlier. In the times we're in, changes every minute, every year, every day. And to your question, it can feel a bit theoretical if you think about it purely in big change management terms. But the principles of we've touched on, have we got the right vision? Have we got the right people around it? Are we celebrating wins? All those things. If you take those and apply them day to day, week to week, it's still very good. So ADKAR for me, and I still think Kotter is a lot of value.
I would agree. I think ADKAR is something that can be quite easily implemented by anybody. It's quite simple. It's quite intuitive, and I'm quite a simple person, so that type of process works well for me anyway.
One model that I'd be familiar with, which I haven't mentioned, John, and another model is change management used by Prochaskis. And he was, I suppose, somebody who looked at how smokers give up smoking. And one key part of that at the end of the change model is how do you maintain the change? And I think that's an important thing that we haven't actually touched on today. How do we ensure that there's a maintenance of that change?
That's for next year, Bernard.
Fair enough.
No, but so what I take from that, guys, to be honest with you, it's like in the PM space. People sometimes say to me, which is better, Prince 2, PMBOK, or Agile? And listening to you guys, and this is where I'm trying to connect my PM knowledge to your change management knowledge. And what I'm taking from this is there are lots of good practices out there. But what you have to do is you have to take, almost like making that magic sauce. You have to take an element of this, an element of that, look at the organization culture, look at the size of the organization, look at the type of change, and you almost come up with, you take good practices and you make them bespoke, and then good practices become best practices. So, and that's the reason I asked. I'm trying to genuinely, as somebody trying to improve my change management understanding. But it was interesting, and the same happens in the project management space. Nobody mentioned the theory of the models first. And I think that, to me, is a really important lesson here. Whether you're a senior leader or you're an educator or you're a consultant, people want to know how do you make things happen before they want to know about the model that's supporting the change management. So that's certainly a takeaway from me. Now, you guys could talk all day, and in fairness, I startled you a little bit, and I said you weren't experts. So I'm delighted to say I was more than proven wrong, and that's only a good thing. So I'm going to conclude this panel, and we're actually on time. You are welcome to stay for Project Fatigue. What a wonderful topic to have after 4.5 hours of project management, change management, OKR discussion. So I'm going to drop you guys off the screen, and I'm going to pop Carl back up, and he's going to be talking. And thanks so much, guys. I will be in touch. Change management is something I see as having a symbiotic relationship with project management. My own intention is to develop a change management module within the MSc in project management. And I think it's just a string to everyone's bow. And I learn as much from developing it and teaching it as the students will. And usually they sometimes, or perhaps all the time, teach me more than I teach them. And that's part of the journey of adult education. So thanks very much, guys. And we'll move to Carl now. So we'll drop the guys off the screen if that's okay, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, guys.
Cheers.
Okay, hi, Carl, so you're up. Long time no see since your MBA.
Indeed. How are you?
Struggling on, as they say. So I won't take up any more of your time, and I'm conscious people are very tired. But
No
I just certainly, I know you're too modest. You've extensive experience in running large-scale complex projects. The topic you're talking about today is project fatigue. It's something you're passionate about, and the idea came about during your MBA in TU Dublin, whereby you were fatiguing in a 2-year part-time MBA and also running a very large tens, if not hundreds of millions project as well at the same time. So it's always lovely to hear people speaking from the heart and from their experience, as opposed to something that they've gone off and researched. So over to you, Carl. I'll just stay here to make sure your slides are up okay.
Thanks, John. And it was actually the project management module that nearly pushed me over the edge on the MBA.
Okay.
You could take that as a compliment.
Okay. Yeah.
So you might just let me know if you can
yeah, your slides are good to go. I'm going to step into the background. Thanks very much, Carl.
Okay, great. So, hi everyone. So this is kind of just going to be a whistle stop tour of some fairly extensive research I did a couple of years ago as part of my MBA. So, as John mentioned, it's project fatigue on complex projects. So, first off, what is project fatigue? So, I've defined this as the effect or damage inflicted on a PMO through consecutive delivery of large cap complex projects. And I certainly learned during the academic research for this thesis that I did, that there's so much good research and findings on kind of the traditional metrics for success and indeed failure on projects. But I certainly found there was a gap in the literature around the whole area of project fatigue, kind of from a human capital perspective, because obviously a lot of what's been talked about today, project management, by its nature is fairly intensive work, and it's not for everyone. So fatigue is definitely, a factor I think that needs to be considered. And, in terms of my definition here, like delivering on the nature of these projects that I've worked on, they're complex and they're a protracted period of time. So I'm on kind of my 5th project now, so about 10 years in. So some of these projects are 2 to 3 years, and then you're going straight on to the next one. So your PMO and the associated teams on a given project can be very energized day one. There's always a lot of enthusiasm when a project starts, but fast track a couple of years down the road, people can be fairly kind of burnt out. So the whole intent of my thesis was to kind of look at a framework that will help PMOs to effectively and more efficiently manage their projects with due regard for their human capital, to make sure people are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and energized, not just week to week, but kind of year on year, because obviously PMOs by their nature are delivering multiple projects at the same time, and obviously consecutive projects as well. So one of the big semiconductor confidential client in League Slip, my company have been working with them for over 10 years, and they're all big projects, that multi-billion dollars. So that's just a snip of kind of the cover sheet of my thesis, and I've a link at the end on it as well. So this is a framework that I put together just to kind of encapsulate the whole idea of what of what I was researching. It's the project fatigue wheel of mitigation. So these are the 6 drivers that I've picked as kind of based on my experience on complex projects that are the main they're the main kind of drivers for project fatigue. There's obviously many more that could be in there, but I just wanted to keep it a kind of a measurable, quantifiable amount where I could, do a reasonable amount of deep dive research into each. So I'm just going to give a synopsis of some of my main findings on each of them. So kind of observations and findings, just kind of a couple of bullet points on each. So the project manager. So conflict and stress are ever present in a PM's life on complex projects. And obviously PMs leaving a project early can have a destabilizing effect. So PM continuity, particularly at leadership level, is important for the entirety of a project. And a PM relay approach also has many benefits, including renewed focus on content expertise. So essentially bringing in kind of an expert in a certain area, a PM expert for maybe a certain phase of the project, is a good thing in terms of the relay. But the core leadership team should remain consistent, throughout the life cycle of the project. Succession planning then, employee contractor turnover in projects is, I've a 6-year-old distracting me here. Yeah, go for it. Sorry about that. Yeah, so employee contractor turnover on projects, it is inevitable. So structured succession planning is important for project continuity and success. So looking at how we can kind of plan for people leaving, is obviously very important. And succession planning is also, it's an important strategy to mitigate against single point of failures on projects. And I think we've all worked with, you know, people and on projects where if, you know, Joe Bloggs was to leave, or as the saying goes, got hit by a bus, like it would be incredibly impactful. So clearly we don't want anyone getting hit by a bus, but we just want to make sure that we are suitably covered in terms of, you know, essentially eliminating single point of failures, you know, pretty much where possible, and hopefully in all cases. And getting this right will certainly enhance a PMO's ability to deliver stable and successful projects. Onto the third driver then, risk management. So maintaining comprehensive risk logs on projects is key. And a project risk register, it should be a living, breathing document. And I've seen, I'm sure like a lot of you guys, lots and lots of risk registers. A lot of the ones I've seen they're given the light of day maybe once early on in the project, and then they're buried. They're not living, breathing documents. It's nearly a box ticking exercise. So, you know, risk registers like that really aren't of much use. They should be, you know, documents where people know where they are. You know, by all means, you could have a read-only access to it, but there should be regular risk meetings, and when there is legitimate risks, they should be logged. And I've even seen projects where, you know, certain managers might say, let's leave that off. We shouldn't highlight that to the client, for example. And my mantra kind of has always been like, I'm not paid to tell the client what they want to hear. I'm paid to tell them what they need to hear. And there's obviously sensible ways to do that, but you know, we're paid from the shoulders up. So if there's something that needs to be said based on your observations from your experience, you know, it's incumbent to say it. And I think the risk register should certainly reflect that. And often resource risks are not included on risk registers, and single point of failure is a really, you know, good example. You know, certain people leaving can have a very detrimental effect on a project. So if there's a risk register without you know, resources included on it, it's probably flawed, or certainly not complete. Knowledge harvesting then is the next driver. So valuable lessons learned often become buried in project files and are rarely referenced. Tiang, will you stop, please? Thank you. Knowledge harvesting is most effective when introduced early on projects. So start, you know, with the knowledge harvesting early on. Capture your lessons learned. Again, should be documents and should be, you know, kind of saved in locations where they're, you know, easily retrievable by, you know, whoever needs to see them. Project learning roadmaps can also assist PMOs in effectively managing the knowledge harvesting on their projects. Occupational stress then, that's another big one. So occupational stress can significantly affect the health and well-being of project management professionals. And it's important to note that people have different thresholds for stress. And there's a responsibility on PMOs to hire or place experienced, good fit project managers on their project. So quite often in PMOs, you know, they might just put a certain person on a project because they're available. They may not necessarily have the skill set, or, you know, maybe the personality for the type of project it is. So, you know, it's not just about, billing hours, etc. You want to put the right people on the project, and, you know, the certain levels that people have to achieve on these projects, you know, the personality is certainly a big factor in that. And the environment and culture cultivated by PMOs can certainly help mitigate against undue stress. Project closure then. So project closure, it's often considered admin heavy, bureaucratic, and overly tedious. And, you know, stating the obvious here, I guess, but poor project closure often results in project failure. And it's not unusual on some of these large cap complex projects that, you know, it can take 2 to 3 years to actually close a project, you know, in terms of outstanding claims and stuff like that. So, you know, having a very good paper trail the whole way through your project is key. And, you know, again, towards the end of a project, you know, enthusiasm does start to wane. So it's important that you have the right people, you know, sticking with the cause to ensure the project is closed effectively. Improved documentation, as I touched on, certainly facilitates a more seamless project closeout. And this one I think is key as well. PMO should consider assigning a project closeout champion to effectively manage their project closure. So some people are, you know, very, very good at dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and some are very good at other areas of project management. So really you want a detail driven person that, you know, not only is, I guess, happy to close out a project, but maybe thrives on that particular phase, because, you know, the lasting impression that you leave on a project is how you close it. So you can undo a lot of very good work over several years, you know, in the last few months. And then just some conclusions and key takeaways. So PMOs adopting a model such as the project fatigue wheel of mitigation will enhance the well-being of their project teams. Well-supported project teams will suffer less attrition and remain more committed to their projects and their PMOs. And reduced project fatigue will help ensure PMOs consistently deliver to their clients. And again, you know, the whole approach I was taking, and I guess my motivation for doing the research in the first place, I was about 5 years working on these big projects when I started the MBA, and I mean, even without the MBA, I was fairly wrecked, fairly jaded from long hours and a lot of intensity, you know, working on the projects. And, you know, at that point, I'd done kind of, you know, 3 back to back. You don't get that much breathing space. So, you know, the whole human component of it, how we look out for each other, how we support each other, how we resource these projects correctly, very, very important, because ultimately, like, you know, companies like DPS Group Global that I work for, like, we sell hours, we sell people, and we sell hours. And I remember one of my managers said to me, you know, one day, if we sell good hours, you know, we get to sell more hours, you know. So ultimately, having energized, you know, enthusiastic people, you know, that are still very motivated by what they do is certainly going to be key to, you know, PMOs continuously delivering on these projects. And then just to finish, just a couple of published links. So I was fortunate enough to be published in the Engineers Journal. I think it was in February of this year. So that's obviously, I think it's about 2,500 or 3,000 word kind of synopsis of what I've went through today, and indeed my research. And also I was published on all the social media platforms within DPS earlier this year as well. So just a couple of links there, and my LinkedIn profile down is below if anyone would like to connect with me. And that's it. So thank you. I know it was quick, but I was just trying to keep to the time, John.
John, sorry for crashing the party, but you're on mute. I can't unmute you.
Okay, how's that, Alex, now?
That's
okay,
good, yeah,
Tom?
thanks.
Very good.
Yeah,
so Alex is
up.
the real brains behind this. I'm only she's the brains. I'm just wagging the tail here, as you can see. So she's giving manners and me. So Carl, I'm going to say thanks so much. You're welcome to stay in the background. And what I would like to do in just is I'd like to actually show the magazine. So I've got the finished draft of it. We will be putting that up for everyone who's attended. We had over 400 people registered for the event. So I'm just going to take a moment here just to share my screen, if that's okay. And you should see now on the right here. So I'm just going to put it into full screen mode here so people can see it. So this is the magazine that we put together. And I have to say, this is the work really of the class. It's a project team. That's what we're about here. So I'm just going to try and take a moment here, if I can, just to very briefly kind of show you the people behind the event that made it happen. So this is the project team behind the event today. It's a team effort of a lot of people working together. In terms of the articles that are behind it, so we will be producing these. I know it doesn't look so well maybe on the screen here, but we can see all the different articles, the different content that's been put into it. So it really is a pretty significant team effort. We're delighted to have done it, but like people said earlier, we're even more delighted that it's finished. So thanks very much to everyone for joining. We will circulate this magazine. And thanks so much too for the MSc project management students. I know it's torture to listen to me sometimes, and putting you through 4.5 hours is almost criminal at this stage. So thanks so much to everyone. We're going to wrap up the event. Thank you. Happy International Project Manager Day. Stay safe. We will continue to run online events, but we do look forward to meeting you all in person at some date in the future. So I'm going to call it a wrap at that. Thanks so much to all our panelists. Thanks to the people who contributed to the magazine. And most importantly, thanks to the audience and all the different speakers who made today possible. So project concluded. Thank you very much.